Tampa City Council on this cool, crisp fall day in Tampa, Florida. I would like to have a roll call, please. Oh, actually, we're not going to do roll call yet, are we? We're going to do the invocation first. Guido, do you want to do the invocation?
Okay. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure this morning to welcome Tyler Wilcox. Tyler Wilcox is an 8th grade principal's honor roll student at Rampello Downtown Partnership K through 8. He attends Greater Bethel Missionary Baptist Church. He's an active member of the Youth Usher Ministry as well as the Audio Video Ministry. Tyler's most treasured prayer before bed is the Lord's Prayer, which he learned at the age of 3. His favorite subjects are science and math, and in his spare time, Tyler enjoys playing video games, reading, playing chess, and hanging out with family and friends. His hobbies are building with Legos, very good, problem solving, crossword puzzles, and picture pieces puzzles, and coding. Tyler's favorite sports are soccer, golf, football, and basketball. And one of Tyler's future goals is to become an aeronautical engineer. I believe he is here with his grandmother, Carrie Jackson. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And his mother is our very own Tanya Wilcox, right here in our office. So Tyler, please come up and please stand for the invocation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning with humble hearts. Thank you for allowing us to see another one of your beautiful days. As we begin this Tampa City Council meeting, we lift up each council member and city staff to you. Grant each council member wisdom and integrity so that all their decisions are guided by fairness, honesty, and a sincere desire for the common good. Bless the city of Tampa citizens, those present here this morning and those unable to attend. Give each council member listening ears to listen with respect, to act with justice, and to build bridges of understanding across our varied backgrounds and perspectives. May their actions today and every day exhibit unity, kindness, and the faith that together we can create a vigorous and inclusive community. Protect those who serve our great city in every capacity, as they work tirelessly to make our city a better place. Lastly, Heavenly Father, we pray for all the individuals that are being affected by the government shutdown. Provide for the individuals and their families during this crisis. Please soften the hearts of our president and the leaders in Congress to put away their divisive ideologies and allow them to enter into a mutual agreement that is beneficial for all citizens, that the government shutdown comes to an immediate end. Father, let your will be done, and may your presence guide us now and always. In his mighty name, amen.
Amen. Lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, Mom, I think that deserves a hug.
Yeah, really. I don't know. I kind of feel like you should just now be the person that chooses invocation. I mean,
That was a great invocation. Oh my gosh.
Can he come up?
Yeah, come on up. Come take a picture with us.
Miss Wilcox.
You should be so proud.
No? Okay.
Good job. Congratulations.
congratulations.
You got the best mom, too. Councilman Carlson?
Yeah, Tyler, I just want to say I've talked to him before, and he's probably going to be head of SpaceX or something like that in the future, so we all need to make sure that happens.
Very good. Okay, very good. Okay, now we'll do our roll call.
Miranda.
Here.
Maniscalco.
Here.
Hurtek.
Here.
Vieira. Carlson. Clendenin.
Here.
We have a physical quorum.
Thank you so much. Okay, Councilman Vieira, you're up. Ceremony. Yeah. like to recognize Councilman Vieira for our ceremonial activity.
Diane, come on, please. We've got a lot here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have some really special guests here today. We have General Remo Butler, who I'll be introducing and giving his background, and Roy Caldwood. And before we have a 1-minute just short film with some highlights from two really, and we have Diane Royer, who's here, who's Roy's wonderful daughter. And we have a film, if you all don't mind playing it, with some short highlights.
CTTV, can you roll the tape, please?
That's Roy Caldwood. Doing it right. He's 103 years old. That's that info. He does push-ups. General Remo Butler. And thank you for that very much, and thank you to CTTV for that and so forth. So we are here for Veterans Day, which is in about a week and a half. We unfortunately couldn't do it the following week, and I thank council for accommodating us. Roy and his family are going to be going to the Caribbean. He's 103 years old and going to the Caribbean. I don't know if he's going to train some freedom fighters there or whatever, but he's a very, very active man. It goes without saying. But I want to go into the background of these wonderful two gentlemen. So Mr. Caldwood is a 103-year-old Buffalo soldier who fought and served in World War II with the 92nd Regiment. Roy is originally from Harlem. He was born in 1922. Imagine that, 1922, about 50 years after the end of Reconstruction, 65 or so years after the end of the Civil War. When Roy was born in Harlem, he grew up with people who would flee the South as part of the Great Migration, 6 million African Americans who would flee terror and lynching in the South and go to places like Harlem, like Detroit, like Philadelphia, different cities in California and so forth. That was the world that Roy would grow up in. He would ultimately serve in World War II, and he would serve in the famous 92nd Regiment as a Buffalo soldier. It's remarkable, not only that he is still with us, but that he still has so much vigor. Roy is involved. He does push-ups. He does exercises. He volunteers for political campaigns. He shot a video for me about voting last presidential election. He would serve in Italy in Purple Heart Alley, that was given the name because of the many injuries and fatalities that occurred there in Italy. And for his valor, he would be given the Bronze Star. He is a decorated World War II combat veteran who is here with us today. And he's very, very active. We have here General Remo Butler, a man who I met. General, we met about maybe 10.
Long time ago.
Como 10 años. Y él habla más bueno español que yo. Él habla fantástico español también. So General Butler, it's interesting because to me, Roy Caldwood is the bridge to General Butler, and General Butler is a bridge to so many of these post 9/11 African American and minority veterans, black and minority veterans today. General Butler is the first black officer in the Special Forces to make the rank of Brigadier General. He was born in Mississippi, grew up in a military family. His father served for 3 3 decades in the United States military, becoming a command sergeant major. He served in uniform beginning towards the end of the Vietnam era and continuing forward to several years after September 11th. He retired in 2004 as the Chief of Staff in the U.S. Special Operations Command of MacDill Air Force Base in South Tampa, and he would take great pride in being a bridge builder and a dream maker for so many people, especially including black officers in the United States military. He is passionate about history, from the first individual, Crispus Attucks, who was killed in the Revolutionary War, who was a black soldier, onward to today. He is very, very passionate about that. So it's our great honor to have these great American heroes with us, and I wanted these two wonderful men who mean so much to us today. They are history. They are history connected to today, and their stories, I submit, mean a lot to us today. They are American history, they are black history, they are veteran history. So I want these two men to come up, and let's first give these great American heroes a round of applause. So, who wants to go first? Who wants to go first? Larry?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm happy to be here. It's an honor for me. It's not something I was looking forward to because I never thought I was going to live this long. I'm surprised to be alive, number one. Many times I thought I was gone, many, many times. So I'm happy to be here. I'm only sorry that none of my good buddies and the ones that I served with are here with me to enjoy this day. And I don't know what I can tell you. What I'll tell you is that when World War II broke out, I thought about it. I had a choice. Was Hitler, Mussolini, or the United States? It was an easy choice. And on the day when on the day when I was looking at about 50 German prisoners who gave themselves freely to us. I looked at them and I said, these guys, in a short while, they'll be in the United States and they'll be able to go places and do things that I will never do because of my color. And for me to be standing here now, never, never, ever thought I would be able to do just what if they're alive now, that they can do. But as I said, it was an experience. It was a pleasant experience. I'll put it to you that way. I found a freedom in Italy that I did not find where I came from. I never thought I'd see a day like this. But I learned a lot. And I try to share what I learned with everyone I meet. And I don't know what I can tell you guys, but I'm happy to be here. And as I said, I learned a lot. And do everything I can to help those who are here working today, and letting them know the freedom that we fought for. We know the freedom is not free. You have to keep your eyes open and protect it all the time. And I will do my best to protect what I have and what I hope for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and all the others, for them to have an even better time than I have had. And I've had a gorgeous, wonderful time. And God has been good to me. I'm in good health. I don't know how I can do 40 push-ups.
I think you
I
should
can
close
do
by
anything.
challenging Councilman Vieira to a push-up challenge. Councilman Vieira, drop and give me 20.
Is
I'm
there anything
waiting.
else you'd like to hear from me?
Councilman Vieira, we're waiting.
Oh, and
Twen-
outside. Oh,
No,
oh,
right, no,
we'll
right
do
here,
it. We'll
right
do
here,
it.
right here, in front of
And
God
and he will beat me.
in front of God and
They built it
everybody.
different.
The chair's rule is the law of the land here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much.
First, let me tell everybody good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, especially for Veterans Day.
Good morning. Can you state your name for the record so they have it on?
Remo
Thank you.
Butler.
Thank you.
Veterans Day holds a lot of significance for me. As you can tell, maybe, I'm a little older. I grew up in the time when soldiers and veterans and sailors were vilified, baby killers, this, that, and the other. They would come to college campuses and come back today, some years later. Hey, thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. You don't realize what that means to a person until you've been in my shoes and have done what I've done. Why do we have veterans? Veterans don't become veterans to get rich. We don't become veterans because we get the best medical care. We become veterans because there's something inside of us that says we are servants of all, and we're going to serve our country. You know, right now, I hate to see the divisiveness of this country. And we talk about veterans. Yes, you have bad veterans, you have racist veterans, so forth and so on, but let me tell you something. I don't know how many people here remember the draft. That was one of the best things for getting people together. Because if you didn't know somebody, it's easy to dislike them. But when you know them, when you eat with them, drink with them, it's hard to dislike them.
You have to face.
Oh, I'm sorry.
rules.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
I'm sorry.
I hate to tell you what to do.
Yeah, I'm
Trust
sorry.
me.
I'm sorry. Yeah. But
I was afraid to tell you. I'm just saying.
that's what gives me the pleasure of being a veteran. Things like this, to come and speak in front of people. I do a lot of mentoring. One of the things last week, a friend of mine came by, and he was 72 years old, in tears. And he's thanking me for how I helped him. That is what we are here for. Too many times we forget that our job is to what? Put our hand up and pull somebody up. Thank you for the opportunity to come here. My old buddy, Congressman Vieira, thank you very much.
We got one more stop before that.
Thank you. And before, so we have Tampa City Council commendations for these two amazing Americans for what they've done. And I also wanted to give them something that I think is very meaningful. This is a picture of somebody named Henry Johnson from the 369th Regiment in the Harlem Hellfighters, in World War I. And he fought off about 19 Germans with the butt of his rifle and a knife. And he was barely honored by our country. He would die 10 years after World War I from his war-related injuries. France would honor him, but a lot more than he would get in the United States. About 80 years later, President Barack Obama would give this man the Medal of Honor that he deserved. Far after his death, of course, and he's buried in Arlington. So I wanted to give this as well to these two men because of what this history means to them and to all of us in the year 2025. God help us if we ever forget. Thank you very much. Let's give him another round of applause.
So gentlemen, I want to, on behalf of a grateful city council, and I think I speak for everybody when I say that people like you, this generation and future generations, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and so many people owe you all so much for every part of our life. I have two beautiful kids. I have a granddaughter. I have a good life, but that life, like you said, didn't come by free. It came for people that was willing to stand up and fight for the United States of America and fight for all Americans. I know it's especially proudful that you, especially during a period of time of really hardship and a dark time in the United States history, that you stood up and fought for a country that maybe in many parts of our country didn't respect you all as equal parts. But the fact that you're here today and knowing that you fought for me just as much as you fought for your family, I am gratefully and deeply appreciative of your service and what you have provided for my life. Thank you so much. Now it's picture time.
He walks better than I do.
I know. I'm still waiting for those push-ups. Very good. Okay, well, now we're going to have a roll call, but we do know Councilman Vera is here, but he will not be present for the roll call. Do we do roll call? No, we didn't. We never accomplished it. Shit, I don't remember that. Oh my gosh. I guess I need to sleep in a Motel 6 last night. Is that it? Okay, so we're going to move on to number 2. Staff. Brandon made me promise, because he's got 2 interns in the house, that I was going to be nice to him today. Brandon, would you like to introduce your interns?
Yes,
Start with your name.
yes. You want to come up? I want to introduce you. We like to introduce the interns.
Come on up.
Hi, good morning, Council. Brandon Campbell, Interim Director of the Mobility Department. And we have 2 interns here with us this morning, and I'd like to allow them to introduce themselves.
Yeah, I'm Michael. I'm doing my master's in urban planning. Just excited to be here and see what's
Michael,
going on.
In public, and when you're in city council chambers, you always start by stating your full name.
Michael Dwyer.
Okay, now we know how to find you.
Hi everyone, I'm Anaya Nelson. I'm going into my 2nd year at USF with my master's in urban and regional planning.
Thank you very much. Welcome to city council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So of course, we're here to talk about item number 2, which is our 2nd workshop on our multimodal fees in the discussion about extraordinary circumstances. I have a few people here that are going to help present or help with some materials and Q&A as needed. First, we've got Catherine Tellez, who is with our consultant, Fair and Peers. She prepared the materials and has been working diligently on updating the formula and providing figures for your consideration. I also have Adam Purcell, who is our interim Director of Transportation Services, who has been managing this project for the department. And then we have Emma Gregory to answer any legal questions that might come up. So with that, I will invite Catherine to come up and to start us off with the presentation. Oh, I'll. For the record, I will invite Emma to come up and kick off her presentation.
It's that kind of morning.
Thanks, Brendan. Good morning, Council. Emma Gregory, Legal Department. So I'm going to give an even more brief overview of the legal framework of the impact fee statute.
Can we just do a pause for a second, because it just came to my attention about we need to do the agenda review before we actually complete any business.
Sure.
So council agenda review, there's 2 items that I'm aware of. Item number 5, there's a request to continue. Councilman.
Second.
Okay, we have a request for Councilman Carlson, a second for Councilwoman Hurtak. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, the ayes have it. And I guess the other one is just the fact that no, I think we're good on that one. Anybody,
Yeah,
anything
so
else?
move to approve the agenda.
We have a motion to approve the agenda from Councilwoman Hurtak, a second from Councilman Maniscalco. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, ayes have it. Okay, thank you. You can continue with your, sorry for the delay.
No problem. Emma Gregory, Legal Department. I'll give a very brief overview of the impact fee statute and kind of where we are in the process. As Brandon said, we are here for the second workshop to consider whether extraordinary circumstances exist. We had our first workshop on September 25th, and we ran a newspaper notice of that just to make sure we really got the notice out that is above and beyond the statutory requirements. But anyway, so Section 163.31801 Florida statutes authorizes local governments to impose impact fees. The city of Tampa has a multi-modal impact fee, which we did a study on and instituted in 2014. So there's a couple ways and restrictions on how to increase an impact fee. It can only be increased once every 4 years. We have to have a study to back it up. There are quite a few statutory requirements that we have to bring to you before we could adopt an ordinance increasing the fee. There are also phase-in limitations. There's a few different categories. There's the 0 to 25% increase category. There's the 26 to 49% increase category. And then the statute actually says that we can't increase fees over 50%. However, it then provides a path to increase them. That's why we're holding this extraordinary circumstances workshop. So to increase a fee over 50%, we have to have a demonstrated needs study, which we've prepared. We have to have 2 workshops to consider whether extraordinary circumstances exist. And then the city council would have to approve any ordinance increasing the fee by a 2/3 vote. And then starting January 1st, some of those requirements will change. So that is the overview of where we are today. If you have any questions now or later, we'll be here.
Councilman Carlson.
We got an email this morning, I'll paraphrase, that said that that there was not due notice with enough backup information. You said we had met the regulatory guidelines. Do you feel like we did that in providing all the backup information that was requested by the party?
Yes.
I have a question. Well, it's more of a statement, I guess, for council to consider. As you look at these requests, I really would, as we spoke yesterday on the briefing, I would, if we're going to do this, I would like to be able to utilize these fees as incentive for development in around, like, say, our transit corridors. Or, so if someone is building higher density development at transit corridor, be able to reduce the impact fees to incentivize that development. I know that you looked at some of that, but I would like to see it more for higher density development and reduced impact fees. Councilwoman Hurtak.
Maybe with some affordable housing?
Maybe, So, I mean, anyway, it's the carrot and the stick approach. So too often we end up using the stick, and this would be a great carrot, and be able to incentivize developers to be able to develop to a density that will support our, long-term goals of land development in the city of Tampa. So I would very much appreciate it from now till then, if you could pursue that or look at that, or maybe look at other examples in other municipalities or counties of how they've done that and how it could be incorporated into this process. Thank you. Nothing else? Okay. Councilman Carlson.
We all are out in the community all the time, and one thing I hear across the board, Republicans or Democrats, is the people who are here, especially the people who have been here for a long time, don't want to pay the cost of people that are moving here. And they see the the impact on infrastructure, and they don't think the people moving here are paying their fair share. And so this is a potential way of helping people who are moving here to pay their own costs instead of taxing the people that are already here. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Is that completed for the staff? Somebody else?
Oh,
Thank you.
yes. So we did have a PowerPoint presentation that was uploaded for today, which Catherine is here to go through for real this time.
Start with your name.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Tellez, a principal transportation planner with Fair and Piers.
Good morning.
Good morning. So this morning, we're going to provide an overview of the city's multimodal transportation impact fee update and discuss the extraordinary circumstances related to this update. Since this is our second time before you and we have some new information we'd like to share, we'll kind of go through the first part that we shared last time at a fairly high level. So an impact fee is assessed by a local government on new development to fund the cost of public infrastructure improvements needed to accommodate that development. Fees are typically paid at the time of building permit issuance and are designed to offset the financial impact a new development has on public infrastructure. This fee would only apply to new developments or redevelopments that intensify development on a site. It would not apply to existing residents. So the purpose of the impact fee is to ensure that existing residents do not pay for the infrastructure that is needed to support that new development. So since it's this one-time impact fee that's only used to fund transportation, there are other fees that the city can impose. And then the fee also needs to be proportionate to the impact on the transportation system. So the impact fee has been around in Tampa since the mid-1980s when the fee was first established. The fees that are currently in place were established in 1989. And while the program was transitioned to a multimodal impact fee in 2014, the fee schedule itself has not changed since 1989. So this current update keeps the same general parameters of that 2014 fee program, but really updates the math behind all of the different components. Also just want to highlight that developers pay for transportation system improvements for their projects in a variety of ways, one of them being through the multimodal impact fee, the second being through mitigation fees, and then the third being through just construction of improvements in their site and around their site boundaries within the public right-of-way. So as Emma had mentioned, some of the legislature has recognized that impact fees are an important source of revenue for local governments to fund infrastructures necessitated by new growth. However, these fees, they do come with certain restrictions and requirements, which we are incorporating into this update. And one of them being that the fee cannot be used to fix existing deficiencies on the transportation system. There are also some of those phase-in limitations of how much a fee can be increased at any one time, unless a finding of extraordinary circumstances are made. And there's several things that need to occur to make this finding. So the first being the preparation of a demonstrated needs study. The second is holding at least 2 publicly noticed workshops dedicated to these extraordinary circumstances. And then the third is that the impact fee. So the first item on the list is this demonstrated needs study. So what extraordinary circumstances are leading to the demonstrated need here? So there's a number of them, and we'll go through them, and it's sort of not any one of these individually leads to those extraordinary circumstances. It's this cumulative effect of not having increased the fee in many decades, construction, inflation, and a host of other things that we'll go through. So the first is the fee has not been updated since 1989. That's a pretty long time. There's a lot of people in this room who were not even born yet. And so that loss to just overall inflation in terms of the building power of the impact fee. And then just the construction cost escalation. So construction costs have increased at a significantly higher pace than overall inflation, meaning that for every dollar that's collected in the multimodal fee, every year it's building less and less transportation system facilities. Third is that there's significant population and jobs increases on the horizon on top of all of the growth that has already occurred. And while the city has been able to effectively manage the transportation system, with the new onslaught of development, it's really important to set the fee at a level where developers can pay their fair share. There's this increasing demand on the transportation system, congestion's increasing, we're sort of at this tipping point without additional funds. And then other funding sources are declining and increasingly uncertain. So gas tax revenues are declining, sales tax measure was not passed, so other sources may be out there, but they're very uncertain, and the ones that we do know of are on the decline. And then also just wanted to note that as a comparison, other jurisdictions have already started to increase their fees, so the city of Tampa is really just not keeping up with some of the peer communities. So just on conclusion on the extraordinary circumstances, as I noted, it's not just one of these items that's leading to the demonstrated need. It's the combination of all of these factors, compounded just by the amount of growth that's projected over the next 20 years. So now that we've reviewed the extraordinary circumstances, we're going to change gears a little bit to sort of discuss the components of the multimodal fee. And you'll start to see more of this in some upcoming presentations that we'll deliver. So at a high level, it's pretty simple. We've got to figure out what's the demand for transportation from new developments. How much does it cost to build the transportation infrastructure needed to support those developments? We want to be careful not to have double taxation, so we've factored in what those new residents and employees and shoppers might pay in gas tax as they go to visit those different land uses, and then we do the math. So sounds pretty simple, but there's a lot of details behind some of the individual calculations. So on the trip generation side, we look at how many trips a land use might develop. And so the prior fee was based on travel patterns that were documented mostly sort of pre-19 or in the 1980s, 1990 time periods. And so we're updating all of those based on more recent data. And in the last 30, 40 years, how and why people travel have significantly changed. So we're seeing some nuances there. So for example, an office development. We've been seeing since the late 90s, early 2000s, pretty steady declines in daily trip generation rates for office buildings. And this is even before COVID and the work from home phenomenon. But employers are becoming increasingly more flexible. The advent of emails back in, late 1990s, 2000s, really, it did minimize some travel and other things. So we're just seeing trip generation patterns evolving, and this is happening sort of across the board. We're also quantifying the trip length. So how far are people willing to travel for different types of things? And so we've established different trip lengths for different trip purposes. So if you're going to a gas station, convenience store, you're not going to travel very far out of your way for those types of trips. You might not even really deviate from your travel path because you're probably not going to stop off to get gas unless you're already on your way someplace else. So we've kind of factored in those trip lengths and then the percent of new trips within the overall calculations. And then on the cost side, we need to figure out, well, how much does it actually cost to build some of the new transportation system infrastructure? So there's a number of different components to the cost. So you need to design the improvements to meet current standards. In some instances, you may need to acquire some right-of-way. Then you need to construct it. And then there's also some transit costs that we've included as well. And then just want to highlight here, what are some of the things that can actually be built from the fee? So we put together this list that highlights all of the different elements of the transportation system that can be constructed with the multimodal fee. So this includes new roads, it includes intersection modifications, new bridges or grade separations, and some of these bridges, it could be a pedestrian-only, bicyclist-only bridge. Right-of-way acquisition. We know when a road is widened or modified, there could be some utilities or drainage improvements that need to be made to accommodate that road construction. We can also fund wayfinding, new traffic signals, the capital cost of installing those new signals, even some park and ride lots and some transit features. So putting in a bus shelter or a queue jump lane to increase the productivity of transit. So as we wrap up today, just want to highlight things that are not subject to the fee. So if you're just doing a minor modification on your house, redeveloping on a parcel, and you're not intensifying the overall land use, you would not be subject to the fee. It also does not apply to government buildings like an elementary school or a fire station. And then there's also going to be a process developed to sort of account for the specific needs in the community, so some reductions for affordable housing and other types of land uses that the city might like to incentivize. So I know the big question on everybody's mind is, well, what do the overall fee increases look like? So we're wrapping up the draft calculations, and Brandon's going to share a couple in a minute here or so. But I just want to say there's not one size fits all. It really does differ based on where you are within the city, because we have 6 different impact fee districts. It also depends on the type of land use. As I alluded to earlier, there's been a lot of changes in how different land uses function. So another example is just in warehousing, light industrial, we're now seeing a lot of things that are more automated, so there's fewer people in a warehouse that might be commuting, so we're seeing a lot of those travel patterns really change. So from here, we'll be working on finalizing the fee calculations and the Nexus study, which will be shared in the next week or so for your review, and then that would be adopted over to hearings. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. So I did want to share, I believe that Adam had.
Do you want to stop? We have some questions. You want to stop here and then we can continue after
We can
the
do
questions?
that, yeah.
Okay, Councilwoman Hurtak, followed by Maniscalco and Carlson.
Thank you. If we could go back to the what can we build slide. In upgrading traffic signals, can we add left turn arrows?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. That's like a huge
Yes,
need.
please.
Yeah,
We need
so
more
that's,
there.
I'm just thinking about the kinds of things that people have been asking for. So we are able to add those types of changes. We can't, and it sounds like here we could upgrade our traffic signals to more modern technology.
Correct. So one of the limitations of the overall fee is that it can only be used for capital costs, and it can only be used on infrastructure that has a lifespan greater than 5 years.
Okay.
So as long as the infrastructure meets those requirements, so it could not necessarily be used to fund a retiming that would require people to go out in the field. That's not really a capital cost, but it could fund your traffic signal controllers, your signal heads, software programs, as long as they have a lifespan greater than 5 years. So those are just things that will need to be determined on a case-by-case basis.
Because I think that's one of the things, I mean, number one, you have new roadways and widening of roadways, and quite frankly, we don't have the land to do that. And you talked about acquisition of right-of-way, and acquisition of right-of-way would be insanely expensive in a city that has less than 4% open land left. So, I mean, I know we can build, but the reality of that is slim to none. So what else can we do? And so I just want people to set expectations for some of the things we can do. But this is really wonderful. It's very thorough, and I greatly appreciate it.
Councilman Maniscalco.
So several questions. First, on item number 4 of what can we build, I heard you say at the beginning of the presentation, this will not go towards existing deficiencies. But then I see what can we build? New or upgrading of existing drainage facilities in conjunction with roadway construction. To me, roadway construction could be grading, milling, and paving a street, not tearing it up and digging. And would this apply to, that's an existing deficiency. A roadway construction, to me, is paving a street or going through and having to do some kind of improvements to an existing street. Would this apply to that?
So we may need to add some caveats to that. It would be if that improvement adds person trip capacity. So if you're widening a sidewalk or adding a sidewalk where there isn't one, that adds person trip capacity to the system. Or if you're able to add a bike lane or something that increases the overall effective capacity of that piece of infrastructure.
So if you would be able to add a bike lane, or if you build a sidewalk, and in that sidewalk, obviously you have a curb, and then you have a storm drain. I think, I'm not an attorney, but I think there's your caveat that you can, meet the requirement, or meet what you put here, in regards to roadway construction. So this could go to drainage improvements of
Correct.
existing areas, because now you're putting a curb, a sidewalk, like you said. So that's that. Item number 10 of what we can build, new sidewalks. I know the sidewalk in lieu of fee was increased recently, but this can go to, as it says here clearly, new sidewalks and widening of existing sidewalks. I know we've seen widening on Highland in Seminole Heights. You know, they redid that whole section of road there going to Martin Luther King. So that's good. This will go to that. My other question is, what is this going to cost? Because in speaking to a gentleman in the community, I heard it's going to be $50,000 more when you build a new house. And I said, well, that's insane if that's true, because if we're looking at housing affordability, see, I have concerns with interest rates being cut. And I'm thinking back to 2019 before COVID, when interest rates were lower. We went into COVID and there was a buying frenzy here, and the cost of housing skyrocketed, where so many people were priced out. And now here we are the last several years talking about housing affordability. Are we just going to make it more expensive? Is it going to be that impactful and that amount, that much of an increase, that we're just defeating the housing affordability? You know, somebody said 50,000, but then I'm looking at this chart, depending on what section of the city you're in, you know, I see it's 6,000, 10,000, 5,000, that it's not, you know, a huge number. And also, at the beginning of this presentation, we are addressing the transportation fee only, right? So it's not a huge number. We're looking at, again, you have this draft copy here with all these numbers of the different sections of the city. So a single family detached, let's say 1,500 to 2,499 square feet, it goes from, let's see, Inner Bay District, 1,707 to $7,700. So you're looking at a $6,000 increase, not a $50,000 increase. Or University North District, that's a $10,000 plus increase for the same house. And then West Shore District, you're going up about $4,500. So it's not 50 grand. We're looking at much smaller numbers, correct?
Councilman Mascoff, all that stuff is like preliminary, so we're, in the two extra hearings.
They were gonna talk about it.
Yeah, they're gonna talk to, they're gonna talk.
Yeah, no, so
Yeah,
I just, you know.
we certainly will.
I heard a huge number and I wanted clarification.
Yeah, and I did want to clarify, as Catherine mentioned.
Would you want to wait
this-
till after you're the second part of the presentation, let me get to Councilman Carlson, we'll let you
Okay, sure.
continue.
Sure.
Councilman Carlson.
Thank you. In one of the previous slides, you have 7 justifications for this. I wish we could add an 8th, and maybe it can be worded in a way that you could add it. But one of the issues, when I started on council 7 years ago, one of the biggest complaints I heard is that the roads are maxed out, and there's more development coming. And so the council at the time asked the question, well, aren't there concurrency laws? And we were told yes. And we said, well, how come they're still able to build? And we were told that some city council 20 years before or something like that had passed a transportation concurrency exception area. And I asked the question, well, how big is that? And the answer was the entire city. And people gasped. And when I talk about this in the community, people gasped. So one of the reasons why the city is jammed is that we have a transportation concurrency exception in the whole city. And at that point, there was a lot of political chaos, and the developers fought really hard not to change that. So a way maybe to word an 8th one would be, we otherwise might have to remove the transportation concurrency exception, which would be an incentive for everyone to agree to slightly higher fees here. Because the public, it doesn't understand why we're putting 40,000 units or whatever south of Gandy, but we're not improving any of the roads or providing any way out. The other thing, Councilmember or Chair Clendenin mentioned incentives for certain kinds of things. I wonder if this is skipping ahead, but if we provide incentives, one of the biggest hurdles and is, my oldest son is 23. He was looking at the market. It's impossible to buy anything because it's so expensive. And the biggest hurdle for people is the first-time home buyers. And so if we were going to provide any kind of incentive, I'd rather provide it on the individual point instead of for the developers. People are also tired of giving incentives to developers, but if we gave an incentive, maybe it's through the developer, but for a first-time home buyer, that once somebody buys a house, presuming the value of the house goes up, they have equity they can roll in a homestead exemption that they can roll into another house. But getting over the hurdle of buying the first home is really difficult for most people now. Thank you.
Okay, continue.
So we did provide an updated table, paper copy
Can we
to
get the
you
wolf
all.
up, please? It's coming. It's thinking. It had the same bad night's sleep I had.
Well, I can at least speak to it, and
There you go.
I know you have
And
hard
for the
copies
public,
of it
for
as
the
well.
public presentation as well. There we go.
So, as you can imagine, across 6 different districts and many different land use types, the matrix that we would point to for specific use cases in specific areas grows pretty large. So we have provided a summary of ranges of that calculated maximum ceiling that you all will likely be considering over the coming month or so. So the line that is highlighted in orange there is what the results of the calculated cost of the additional demand on the transportation system that we would expect under a new development. And to Councilman Maniscalco's question, I did want to make sure that it is clear, and I think Catherine mentioned, but these only come into effect when there is a change in the intensity of land use. So it's calculated and assessed at permit issuance. So if someone's moving into the area into an existing house, that does not necessarily impact them at that point, depending on how and when that house was constructed.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I see some builders here today, so I'm going to ask, so change of land use means if it's an empty lot, but it's a single family, would building a new house on that single family empty lot trigger this or not?
So if it's an infill development where there was no house before, then yes.
But if it's an older house that was torn down and is being replaced by yet one more single house,
Correct. So if it
that
was,
would not.
correct.
But if someone took a single house and put a duplex on it.
Yes, that's an increase in the intensity
Okay,
of land use.
okay, thank you.
So-
And then just a comment for the future, orange highlight, completely impossible to see.
Understood. Thank you. Yeah,
I have to step out for one moment.
It is, but we could do Miami Dolphins in a bit of a lighter shade. Okay, does anyone want to?
So we are happy to brief you individually on that larger matrix as desired and as needed, and to come back to accommodate any discussion in chambers as well. I don't know if Emma wanted to mention anything else about the remaining schedule, but given the legislative framework that we're working within, I think she mentioned it at the beginning, should council wish to increase it above that 50% threshold, it does need to happen before the end of this calendar year. And that will be for you all to discuss and decide.
Ms. Gregory?
No, I don't think so. I'm Gregory, Legal Department. So this extraordinary workshop circumstance consideration, it doesn't lock you into anything. I think we'll likely come back to chambers to seek some more guidance from you all, and then we would bring the ordinance back for 1 or 2 readings, and the ability to increase it in any of the other phase-in limitations is certainly also on the table.
So, quick question here. These are some really large numbers, but we also are aware of the fact that due to state statute, we cannot increase them more than 50%, and if we do, it has to phase in over 4 years. Can you, if I got that right, if not, correct me, and then go ahead and if you could kind of explain that with pulling the wolf back up so people could take a look and see.
Sure. So any increase, let's see, let me just make sure I'm saying this correctly. So an increase from 0 to 25% has to be done in 2 annual installments. An increase from 26 to 49% is 4 equal increments.
Okay.
And then the law, as it is currently written, a 50% or more increase could be immediately phased in. But starting January 1st, there's a change to the law that will require a 4 equal installment. It could be 4 annual installments. Let me double check that. But yeah, it will institute a phase-in procedure starting January 1. And that's also something that we could elect to do ourselves. I can write that into the ordinance.
So I think you said you're planning to meet with us individually about this. I think I would add that to the question of like, how do you see phasing? I do understand that we have a large jump to make, but I also believe that phasing is not a bad idea. I will listen to my colleagues on that, but Councilman Maniscalco.
Yeah, no, phasing it in, I mean, we haven't touched these since 1989 when I started kindergarten. And here we are. I want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
But some people weren't born. I was born. I was 5. But phasing it in, 50% sounds like a big number, and it is a big number. So why not do it at smaller increments, little by little? We haven't touched it since 1989. Number one, the concerns that I have, the cost of land in Tampa has gone up. The cost of construction materials, the tariff discussion, which I think the Supreme Court takes up next week. And we'll see if they're upheld or struck down. I don't know. Everything is becoming more expensive. We're up here trying to combat the housing affordability. Interest rates are coming down, which means there's going to be cheaper money in the market overall, as I mentioned earlier. But if you look at what we can do with these fees, as Councilmember Carlson said at the beginning of the discussion, people that are living here are concerned on all sides of the aisle of, we don't want to pay for all these new people coming here. We've been paying taxes our whole lives, whatever. But as my questions were answered earlier of drainage improvements, sidewalks, so much good can come out of this, then this is something that if it's a reasonable phasing in, it's something that I'd be open to supporting. And, of course, we hear from everybody else in the public.
Let me also mention that the statute requires a 90-day delay for essentially the effective date. So we could phase it in over, say, 4 years, but then also if council adopts the ordinance, there is also a 90-day waiting period before we could start assessing that new fee on the new permits coming in.
So if there isn't anything else, my next question is, what is the next step? What do you need from this council to move forward today?
So these workshops really are just for consideration. Mm-hmm. I think that if we came back and we got direction from council moving one way or the other, I would incorporate some of what we've discussed at these past 2 workshops into the ordinance, and there would be findings included in that ordinance, and then by adopting that ordinance, you would also be adopting those findings. So,
our lawyer is not here right now, well, yeah, public comment, but also just trying to figure out direction for, like if that means timing or whatever. Okay, well, we'll listen.
Can I just add one thing? One other
Councilmember
context.
Carlson.
Thank you. One other context, I'm sure everybody knows this, but I've been to 2 conferences in the last 3 weeks at the state level. And there's going to be it looks like there's going to be some kind of property tax reform, and there are different versions of it, doing away with property tax completely for homeowners or seniors, and or reducing it across the board. And they're telling us that the polls show that if it goes on the ballot as a constitutional amendment, it'll be 76% people want to vote for it. So that will this, and the CFO says, don't let cities tell you that it's going to hurt police and fire. But as we all know, the property taxes altogether don't even pay all of police and fire, and so it will potentially have an impact on that. And so we don't have the. There are ways that the city is wasting money, and I'm fighting hard to try to reduce those. But this is a way that we can directly help make people who are moving here pay the costs that they're bringing to our city. Thank you.
Councilman Viera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you know, in building on something Councilman Carlson said, I want to touch on, which is it's a sad state of affairs for us, because if you look at us a couple of years ago, imagine where our communities would be if we could have kept that AFT tax that passed in 2018, over $300 million a year. Back then, that would probably be $400 million today a year to put in our roads, to put in a mass transit, and that's all gone. And because of that, we're looking at solutions like this, which are great, right? But man, like I always say, this is a half a chicken nugget, and we missed the McRib, you know. So that's the challenge with us. And now the stuff coming down from Florida is awful. I'm all for property tax reform, mend it, don't end it, take care of the extremes and tame the excesses. But what people are doing is looking at defunding the revenue sources that we have for public safety, as well as our roads, as well as our public schools. If you care about our public schools, they're coming after that, and they continue to come after that. So again, this is great stuff, but it's just a shame. It's a shame that we have to rely so much upon this, including for the future. We're better than that, so that's all.
A chicken McNugget and a rib. I think you need that quote put on, like, in gold and put on your office wall. One of the great quotes of Councilman Viera of all his, it'll be in the book. Speaking of great quotes, Councilman Miranda.
I haven't spoken much because I got a little throat coming on, but I've been listening. And this is something that has got to be addressed quickly, and I hear different council members say different things, and I agree with some of it at some point. But what I'm looking at is that if these things have not been addressed since 1989, and now we're in 2025, that's 35 or 36 years ago. So for me to sit here and say that I'm not going to increase it to the point where because if we don't do that, the taxpayers that are living now are paying the burdensome amount of the cost of doing business for that period of time, whatever that period of time is. So I think that the line has been drawn on the sand, and I'm looking at very carefully on the whole spectrum of the 5 across, the single-family, multifamily, office, retail, and industrial. When you look at that, and it comes out at you, the numbers for the comparison with Hillsborough County urban, City of Orlando downtown, City of Orlando others, and Orange County urban, we're far behind. And so I would stress that we should address this today, sometime in the future, the closest as possible, because when you look at the numbers like this, it just stands out. If this was your bank account, what would you do if you were banking at one bank and the other banks are giving more interest? You would move your bank account to that bank to get the more interest. It's a logical thing. This is not a business deal. This is a deal for equity to make sure that we do not fall continuously behind and keep asking for other things from the taxpayers that are here to those that are coming in. And is that going to solve the problem? To some point it will, but is it going to hurt development? I don't think so. I just don't think so. Because they know the people that are moving in. Listen, when these condos that are sold in downtown Tampa for in the hundreds of millions of dollars, 80 million, 30 million, 25 million, you hear like a bidding thing, and they don't ask what's the cost of doing this. They just want what they want. Yep. And is it like that the whole district of the city? No. But also the prices of what you're buying is also different. So these things equate to fairness, to the wealth, or not the wealth of the individual, but it has a criteria by which you can set your, if I had long heels and I could set them in, and they say, stop this and let's go the other way. That's all I'm going to say for now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, your Councilman Miranda. So we're going to, are you finished with your presentation? If so, we're going to go to public comment. Mr. Shelby, could you please read rules for public comment?
Yes, after the end of each item, the public shall have the opportunity to speak. Please sign the sheet outside if you plan on speaking. It's 3 minutes per subject of the workshop. General public comment is not taken at a workshop meeting, and please confine your comments to the subject matter that is being sought relative to the workshop. Thank you.
If you wish to speak on item number 2, only item number 2, please approach the podium. If you're not the first person up, you can stand against the wall. Anybody here to speak to item number 2? Start with your name, please.
Uhuru Mteznat. Uhuru means freedom in Swahili. And I say we as African people should always be thinking about our freedom, because for the last 825 years, 52 generations, we hadn't been free. I'd like to speak specifically on item number 2, as instructed by the city attorney. And I would like to say that I think that the city council should expend some of its energy and some of its time and take some of the resources or some of the funds that's generated from item number 2 and put it towards seeing if there are rigged elections in District 5. I think the city council should take some of the funds.
Excuse me, that's out of order. It's not in line with, have you heard from the presentation about what these district funds are allowed
Sir,
for?
how is that out of order? I'm talking about item number 2. This man's talking about chicken nuggets.
I'm not going to argue with you. You're out of order.
I'm not going to argue with you.
I'm not going to argue with you. You're out of order. You can continue to talk about district. Thank you for stopping the time. Okay, we're going to start your time again. Thank you.
Okay. I think the City of Tampa City Council should take some of its funds and resources and revenues that's generated from item number 2 and do some sensitivity training towards letting the city council members know to stick to the script, just as they want the general public to stick to the script, and don't raise issues of chicken mac ribs and chicken nuggets and other things, and then tell the general public that they can't articulate the way they want to. You guys do discriminatory practices live and in person and have no objection to doing it. And you're out of control. But what I'm saying is, I'm gonna stick to the script, which is item number 2. The city should take some of the resources that's generated by item number 2 and see how Naya Young got a 300% increase in the votes.
Mr. Daniels, once again, I'm going to rule you out of order. This has nothing to do with the special election. This is about increasing our impact fees. If you would like to speak to that item, I will allow you to continue. If you don't, I would ask you to sit down and wait for the next item.
Man, you're off the chain, bro.
Good morning.
What I am saying is that the city of Tampa should take some of these funds from item number 2 and put it towards seeing what's going on in the elections in District number 5 and see if they're rigged or not.
Mr. Daniels, I rule you out of order, and I'd like you to leave the chambers, please, for the rest of the day.
See how y'all run niggas out?
Have a nice day, sir. Anybody else wishes to speak to item number 2? Thank you. Start with your name, please.
Good morning, Council. My name's Kevin Robles. I'm a local developer here within the city of Tampa. Thank you today for your time, and I appreciate all the thoughtfulness and comments. I want to speak just slightly. I've been doing this a very long time. Been very involved with advocacy and impact fees, and this is not the first municipality that have showed up for this. One of the things that has struck me in this particular case is that it appears to me that there was a mandate came down from the state that said, look, you guys you have to operate within these constraints. It really is about cost measures, cost of living, and that sort of thing. And in the course of, as most recently as Monday afternoon, was on a Zoom call, you guys didn't even have the figures yet generated from the consultant. That feels very, very uncomfortable to me as a developer, that we don't have proper figures. Now, I realize today's hearing is you're looking for an extraordinary circumstance. I don't believe that not raising the fees for 36 years is an extraordinary circumstance. I want to make a couple comments real quick on the presentation. I felt like the lining up of where current fees are around the state, some of the examples. Comparing impact fees in an emerging suburban county is way different than in an urban city environment. So I want to make sure that there's some clarity there, that because the fee here is $1,762 or whatever those numbers lined up, is not what it takes to pay fair share or contributing share when you're trying to 8-lane a highway out to the green fields, across suburbia, using federal highways, state highways, and that sort of thing. So I want to make that, and I think it's unfair in that presentation. Just have a little bit of context there. I think today somebody will speak to the fees in St. Petersburg, which are actually lower than Tampa's. I don't see St. Petersburg lining up in that chart, and that is a very like-kind city, and I do business in both, so I'm very well aware of how they operate. One of the things, and I know it might be a little touchy, but I've been very involved with city staff and that sort of thing, and it many times frustrates me when I get in there and there's no accountability on the staff side. When I see an increase that says that you bought 18 cents on the dollar 36 years ago, what you do today, though that's skewed, and where's the accountability to staff to make sure that you're paying the right amount for infrastructure and capital improvements within there, that you're paying the correct amount, and I would look to this council to do a more thoughtful approach of, hey, let's have some accountability of what we're spending our money on, not just, hey, if we can get some additional money. I remember 25 years ago on stormwater, for $90 a year, you would solve your stormwater problems. Thank you so much.
And next.
Good morning, Adam Mays, local developer, City of Tampa resident. I'm also going to speak to the agenda here. First thing is affordability that we touched on. The prices of houses have gone up, the cost of land in the City of Tampa, the cost of construction materials, tariffs, et cetera. This will just exacerbate the problem, continue to increase fees, that'll increase cost. And, in light of, builders not paying their way, this year we'll pay more than $1 million in impact fees. And we are a single-family home builder primarily, where we tear down a resident that was there and build a new resident. So the impact fee there is not impacting the transportation. There's a 2-car garage typically there, or carport, et cetera. So raising these fees to what I saw for the first time today to 500%, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Comparison neighborhoods is another reason I think that we need to look at. I don't know why we did not look at Pinellas. It's the most like kind. We do business over there as well. I brought this chart again to help show that. So again, we showed Hillsborough County, we showed Manatee, we jumped all the way over to Orlando. Pinellas County is down at the bottom. That does include St. Pete downtown. That is both their districts. They've got a general schedule as well as a downtown schedule. Either they're better with their funds, or I don't know what, but they are less than City of Tampa's. So increasing the fees in City of Tampa by 500%, which is the first time today I saw that number, we will take our business to St. Petersburg. And maybe that's the goal of council and or what. But as a business, we will take our business to St. Petersburg. Lastly, timing. Why now? Why now? Why now? It's because we're playing beat the clock with the Senate Bill 1080 to try and get these fees blown off over 50% to 500%, a 500% increase. You've had 36 years to do it. Now you're going to do it in 60 days? You cannot get me a single family permit in 60 days, and you're going to ram transportation impact fees in 60 days down my throat? Can't get me a single family permit in 60 days. 500% increase overnight. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, council members, for letting me speak today. My name is Luke Surak, and I'm a 25-year-old Tampa native, turning 26 in a couple weeks. I grew up here. I love this city, and I want to build my life in it. But vague proposals like this make it feel like an uphill battle, pushing young people like me further away, I have a few key concerns about this mobility impact fee hike and why the extraordinary circumstances doesn't hold up, plus some suggestions to fix the process. Firstly, not raising the fee for 38 years isn't extraordinary. It's been the norm for these fees for the last 38 years. Ironically, considering raising the fee is the only extraordinary circumstance that I've heard. Inflation and growth should be expected, so I don't understand what the sudden emergency is. If mobility needs cash all of a sudden, have they been asleep at the wheel? Their big reason boils down to it's been a long time, which is very weak. Mobility's track record shows lack of foresight and ineffective spending. Unfortunately, lack of foresight has been the ordinary standard. Mismanagement does not justify an extraordinary circumstance. Before thinking about a hike over 50%, council should demand a full independent audit of their spending. Let's root out the waste first and not reward bad management with more money to burn. Second, this whole extraordinary circumstances process is backwards and rushed. We haven't seen any real data, proposed rates, or calculations from mobility until 10 minutes ago. How could we possibly judge if it's justified? The public had no access to the draft table provided this morning. Vague claims about growth, costs, and inflation sound serious, but where is the proof of tying them to a true emergency? The study has plenty of claims, but no pure data available. This fee can't fix existing problems like maintenance of potholes, sidewalks, or ditches. It's only for hypothetical new roads and other small items. But Tampa's built out with no big tracts of land left compared to counties such as Manatee and Sarasota that they're comparing us to. Don't let SB 1080 rush this. Staff needs to lay out the numbers first, and then we can have an honest and rational discussion on whether a big jump is even needed. At the end of the day, this increase would pass straight through to new home buyers, hitting my generation the hardest. As a young professional already priced out, it's heartbreaking to see unjustified and rash determinations like this make owning a home here where I grew up feel impossible. My generation just wants transparent and smart governance that doesn't waste our shot at a future. The way staff presented this is vague, unfair, and negatively impacts young people like me who want to stay in Tampa.
You're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man. Next.
Hello, my name is Ocean Fitz. I'm a public policy student at St. Petersburg College, and I just have some questions and comments before the court. These new impact fees, I know there was some talk about them going towards sidewalks and roads, but has there been any thought about going towards public transportation and making these new impact fees work for the people who they're impacting? For example, like if you're living far out in the far reaches of Tampa, it costs a lot of money in terms of transportation to get into the city, and I'm wondering if the city of Tampa was looking at public transportation, as I think that is really the only logical future of any transportation in a city with millions of people. I know Congressman Vera, I'm sorry if I pronounce your name, Vera was, I'm so sorry, was mentioning earlier that we were looking at transportation earlier, but it got cut. And I was wondering, are we trying to go back to, is there any hope for public transportation in the city? My mother works at the University of Tampa. She commutes every week from St. Pete to Tampa. And I live in Manatee County, and it takes almost an hour to get up here. And I know that's not the fault of City of Tampa, but has there been any thought of a, like, Manatee County, St. Pete, and Tampa? It's a grid, it's a tri-state area almost, tri-county area, and like one big circuit. Could these impact fees go towards the hopes and dreams of maybe affordability and transportation in this area? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Connie Burton.
Good morning, Connie Burton. Don't let your head blow up with all these congressmen and your next level of government.
It's only directed to one of us.
Yeah, but the rest of y'all hold it back. I don't see how it would ever be affordable for working class people in communities that you described in Resolution 568 that had a long history of neglect. Right now, the houses in our community is costing close to $250,000 and more. So working class family, new families with these additional fees would be thoroughly impacted unless we had protected classes of neighborhood. Something has to give here. When I think about, and this could be totally different, but the impact fees for that, and I think about, you know, being a member of East Tampa and listening to CRA, and then watching a developer come to the CRA and ask for $5 million for road improvement for their building, that the $5 million was not going to be used for infrastructure, but for roads. And so now I'm sitting right there thinking, now, is the roads going to be paved gold? $5 million for one developer out of East Tampa. So I would just hope that you find a way to rethink some of this in order to bring some type of fairness to communities so we can have a period of catching up. When we think about Sulphur Springs, the lower part of East Tampa, this additional cost would completely wipe that community of new homeowners out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. Mr. Michelini.
Good morning, Council. You know, we had those meetings with the city staff, and quite honestly, they haven't proved their case at all. They've inserted things in here that, and they've moved things around.
So, Mr. Michelini, I know this is your first time in city council, but you have to start with your name before you start speaking.
Excuse me, I thought you announced me, Steve Michelini. It'll restart my time now.
Blessed. Go ahead.
Please. Anyway, we met with the staff, and we didn't have any information available. And they said, yeah, we agree. But if I came to you with a petition for a rezoning or an appeal, and I said, well, you know, I don't have all the information available, but I'll get it to you. Now, what would happen? You wouldn't accept it. And that's why the development community is saying, don't accept this. You're trying to jam something in at the last minute. Quite honestly, they could have done something earlier. They didn't have to wait 30 years. But now that there's a deadline, all of a sudden it's urgent that you consider extraordinary circumstances to increase it above the 25%. You still have that availability of 25%, but they haven't justified going above that. They simply haven't done it. Where's the demonstrated need study? Hasn't been done. The basis of it has not been increased since 1989. It's not the basis either. Communities that allow either development patterns are distinctively different. They've used distinctively different issues and compared them and made them part of Tampa. 4 of the 7 comparisons were based on larger suburban and rural area development, and they've now changed that. Not keeping pace with other jurisdictions, that's not the criteria. Overall demand for multimodal travel has been demonstrated. It's failed twice, but they want to use that to fund, backdoor fund multimodal transportation. The size of existing traffic lanes have been reduced with inserting bicycle lanes, putting on-street parking where you have streets that used to function at level of service C or D are now failing. Traffic jams are everywhere. The sequencing of the lights have been adjusted, so you can't get through the lights from one, you can't go through more than one light. You're stopping. Right now, you have traffic backing up from Kennedy all the way down to Morrison on Howard. Why is that? Suddenly happened. The roadways are previously operating, at these service levels. Simply, it's untenable. Which is it, an impact fee or a multimodal fee? I've heard them say both. And then they said, well, they can't use it for maintenance and reconstruction. But then the list that they provided to you says that they do. You wouldn't allow me to borrow against the future? And why should you allow them to come in and present this case to you and say, we need this, we have to have it? And we all recognize that the fees probably need to be increased, but not this way. Follow the rules. I mean, the legislature, you wonder why they keep stepping in and usurping the power of local government. It's because you don't follow the rules. And the staff gets up here and tells you, Well, you know, we just need it right now. Follow the rules, and this doesn't do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McElhaney. Next.
Good morning, Stephanie Pointer. Please note the dates on the first time I saw this report. Over 2 years ago. Over 2 years ago. So this is not a surprise. You guys have had this for at least 2 years. Why staff didn't bring it forward before now, I don't know. But I want to point out that this has been around for a long stinking time. This is my old report. I got a new one. I'd like to point out a couple things. Number one, on Rattlesnake Point, one of the developers came to the city and said, hey, listen, we need some infrastructure increases. We need some things improved on Rattlesnake Point. We need the light at Tyson and West Shore. We need our road to be paved on Tyson. And those developers were told no by staff. They were told no, that they could not do a tax increment funding. So there are developers who recognize that what they're paying in is not enough. There are developers who recognize that what they're paying in is not enough. We still don't have a regular light at West Shore and Tyson. They finally paved it this year. Now, that was like 2-3 years ago. So Buckhorn was extremely vocal about he wasn't going to raise impact fees. He wasn't going to raise fees, period. And that's from upper echelon city staff. That is not something I made up. I'll be happy to supply the name, but I'm not going to sell out staff. But the bottom line is that when you go to raise these fees, I want you to consider this. If you only raise them, okay, so if this was a $100 fee and it took place over 4 years, it's the same thing as if you raise it $50 over 2 years. So you may as well go for the big and spread it out, because then the next council doesn't have to deal with this crap again. The bottom line is, it's kind of like the salary thing where everybody was like, well, what are we going to do? Well, the bottom line is these fees haven't been raised. Jane Dunkett stood out there and told me long before she was the administrator, when she had Vic Bede and his name, my name forgives me, but when she had that job, she told me we have not raised these fees since 1989. We need to raise these fees. That was before she became an administrator, but it happened. Okay, phasing these in is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, so let's take this into consideration. We'll do an average house in Tampa now is about $400,000 a year. That's roughly $3,000 a month. If you raise these impact fees, you're looking at, if somebody only pays the principal, taxes, and interest every month, you're looking at 2 additional payments. If the developers don't eat any of it. But I've never seen a developer eat the cost. So why would we, and we cannot raise any other fees. I got yesterday that the construction services will not be able to, the LDC, the land development will not be able to raise the fees. If you don't do this, nothing will be raised.
Thank you, Ms. Pointer. Next. Good morning.
Good morning.
Bring it home. It looks like you're last.
Tara Bluma, that's hard to follow. The percentage that you raise the fees is less important to me than are we paying for the impact that the new development is causing. And they're probably too low. I think we can all agree that they're too low, but let's make sure that the impact is paid for. And most important to me is, what are we doing with this money when you do collect it, and are we spending it efficiently? I know that in my part of town, the area most developed, which presumably has collected the most amount of impact fees, we had a project that was supposed to be paid for with a new turn lane on Interbay that still hasn't been done. The project was canceled, and that was an approved project. So if we, the most impacted area, still aren't getting projects done with this money, then what are we raising them for? Not arguing that we shouldn't raise them, but let's be smart about what we do with the money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes public comment on that item. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes. If council doesn't mind, Emma Gregory, Legal Department.
Start with your name, please. Okay, I'm sorry.
Emma Gregory, Legal Department. I just heard a few things that I just want to clarify for the record and for you. So we have done a demonstrated needs study And actually, we provided you all a draft copy of that before the September 25th workshop. There seemed to be a bit of confusion about multimodal versus impact fee. So an impact fee is a type of fee that the legislature has put forth that local governments are allowed to adopt. The city of Tampa has a multimodal fee. So that's the type of uses in the city that we can use the money for. And we are following the current law, and we are prepared to follow any future laws that come into effect or, in future legislative sessions. And to the point that why now? So we followed council's direction, and we have been working on this. We had to secure a consultant. There's a lot of work, a lot of data collection. I think that you saw some of that today. So we have been working towards this for some time.
Emma, can you just, for the audience, clarify, the people that are listening, clarify the next steps so people know where the decision points are and where we're at in this process?
Yes. So, with Brandon's leave, I'll answer. So it's very likely that we will come and ask for a motion that perhaps a staff report be put on the November 20th meeting, asking for another discussion on this. And then we'd be seeking some direction from the council. And then after that meeting, we would be looking in December to bring an ordinance for 2 readings that will either suit you all or not. And so those are the next steps.
So we'll have another opportunity, so council can work with staff between now and the next staff report to do some adjustments. And for the folks that are listening, then I'll recognize for other council persons. I think there's one thing that I can guarantee you, that this council is going to increase the fee. I mean, it's just a matter of now negotiating what that looks like. So I think rather than, coming out against something, if you bring suggestions to your council persons that you work with about where you feel like we could make adaptations or amendments or what we can do with it, I think that'd be most helpful. Councilwoman Hurtak, I saw first, and then Councilman Carlson, and then Councilman Vera.
Problem with November 20th is that we've already put 3 staff reports and only 3 staff reports because all of us are going to, thanks to the late Councilwoman Henderson, we're going to participate in the Great American Teach-In that morning. So we don't start council until 11, which is why we've limited it to 3 staff reports. So we could, as a council, override that and go ahead and do that anyway. I just wanted to throw that out there. Since we do not have evening session, it is up to us as to whether or not we want to.
Motion to override that rule and add the staff report on November 20th.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready for that, is that good?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you
Councilwoman
very much.
Hurtak.
May I?
We have- Oh,
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Maniscalco, yes, sir.
Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney, could we have a statement of exactly what that motion is? And maybe if staff or legal would articulate it for the council member, or the council member would do it, but rather than just make a motion.
Do you have something written, prepared for this?
I don't.
Okay. Well, we can just make a motion to hold the space. And then
Well,
you can bring that.
what is it you're if I can, Mr. Chairman, may I inquire?
You may inquire.
What is it you're asking that council come back or direct you to come back with on the 20th of November?
A presentation and discussion of the proposed rates.
Yes, so.
You don't need legal language.
Would you have a draft ordinance for them to review at that time? Or would that only come back for first reading would that be the first time they see that in the first meeting in December?
Right. So if we come back in November, we would be seeking guidance from council, and then off of that guidance, I would then prepare and submit the ordinance for first reading.
Okay.
Is that your intent?
So November 20th is a staff report with the updates showing the different fees and percentages, correct?
In anticipation of presentation of a draft or a first reading on the first meeting in December?
Yes.
Thank
We have a motion to waive the rules to allow an additional staff report on November 20th from Councilman Maniscalco for staff to return with the additional information on the mixed modal fee. We have a second from Councilman Vera. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Okay.
Councilwoman
I
Hurtak.
just want to do a quick motion then while we're here
Now,
to,
they wanted to speak to this issue. Do you want to wait for that?
oh, I just wanted to make sure we had space on December 4th for the actual ordinance.
Okay.
I'll do it
let's-
after.
Yeah, let's do that. Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, I just want to make a few comments in response to public comment. One is there are questions about why this hasn't been raised in 36 or whatever years, and I don't know all the reasons, but the different policymakers make different choices. The last administration decided to raise property taxes for everyone, and to put the burden on everyone. And what we're looking at doing is trying to let the new people pay for their own costs rather than putting an additional burden on everyone else. Another person mentioned that the St. Pete numbers are lower. I would appreciate if we had this chart with the top 10 cities in Florida, so that we would know what they're charging, just so we can do a comparison. I think that's it. Yeah, cities.
Can I amend that to say cities, not counties?
Yeah, I don't know what the numbers are, but I think for transparency reasons, there have been numbers that were shown to us in the past where the public accused the administration of cherry picking. If we are consistent, we compare to our peer set, like the top 10 cities, then by population, then it'll then we can compare hopefully apples and apples. Someone else brought up the point about getting a permit, that it takes so long to get a permit. Some people say it's taking 2 or 3 years to get permits now. What I would recommend is if you put this in place, that it only would be for new permits applied for after January 1st. So if people apply for a permit on December 31st and it takes 3 years, that they're still included under the old one, because it's not fair to penalize them if our permitting process takes a long time. And the last thing, someone talked about public transportation or public transit, which is a big discussion that always comes up. That takes a huge funding source to fund public transit, and there are many different efforts to do that. The last two failed miserably because of the way the campaigns were run. One failed at the ballot. The other one, the people running it poked the opposition in the eye, so the opposition turned around and sued them. So it didn't fail because they sued. It failed because the campaign poked them in the eye and caused them to sue them. So had they collaborated with them, had they worked with them, I had a public forum where I invited just them to speak at different times in the same forum, and the pro-transit people wouldn't even speak because the opposition had spoken. And we have to, if we're going to build a coalition around funding public transit, we need to make sure that everybody's at the table, whether Republican or Democrat, and try to build consensus for everyone. And I hope that the next campaign, whatever it is run by grassroots, not by people with political interests. And there is an effort right now that's run by real grassroots efforts that's been around for 10 or more years, Transit Now. And Councilmember Hurtek also is involved in it. And Transit Now is trying to put together a real grassroots effort. They're trying to put together information. Anybody who's interested, I would encourage you to get involved with them. They're looking at different funding sources, and it's not going to be driven by politicians and not going to be driven by millionaires. It's going to be driven by people who care about transit. Thank you.
Councilman Miranda.
Mr. Chairman, that we had an item that superseded this item, the one we put, that we take the other one off?
No.
Space for this item for November.
Okay,
Yeah, we
just added
just
space.
added
All
to
right,
it, yeah.
no problem.
We just
I
added
just want to make sure.
Anybody else? Councilman Bureau.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I want to say it's funny with public comment, we always have public comment, and the public comment on this issue on both sides, I think, was very instructive and very educational and everything. I think something Chairman Clendenin said is important to note, which is I do think that some level of increase is going to pass, and I think what we're hearing from one side is absolutely maybe not to anything, but maybe there's an argument to saying, hey, that coffee's really hot, let's put an ice cube in it, okay? And I think we're open to that. It goes without saying. So yeah, I think that's important. Since 1989, that's a long time. I'd like to know what the inflation has been since then, and what the number back then is today with inflation. 1989, a number, another summer. That's a long time ago. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hurtek.
I really appreciate the conversation today. The public's comments are great, and to Councilmember Carlson's point, the organization is called Transit Now Tampa Bay, and it's available on both Instagram and Facebook. And if you follow them, you'll get news about kind of transit items that the area is working on. But for this, I understand. I'm really grateful that some developers and builders did come. I'm grateful we had community members here. I think the idea today is that we are finding that there is a need. But the great thing is, we may decide that it's not 50%. We may do that work, and it may be under 50%. But today, by saying we do see the need and the availability, we're making sure that we're not locking ourselves out of that opportunity. And I think the next step is the individual meetings with council members to talk about the numbers behind this. Also, to make sure some of that number information is on a website that people can see, and to make sure that folks set up meetings with us to talk about concerns, whether from the neighborhood side, from the developer side, from everyone, so that when we get here on November 20th, we can have a robust conversation. So I really do appreciate Councilmember Carlson talking about the top 10 cities. I'm more interested in the cities in the surrounding areas as well. And again, cities, counties, that was a good point someone made, building roads where there weren't roads before, wildly different than what we're trying to do. So just kind of hearing from that. And the great thing is, all this conversation means we'll find a decent median space. And I do believe that. And I just want to say thank you for everyone for participating. And I look forward to the conversation going forward.
Thank you. Did you have a motion?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to see, I knew I was going to forget, and that was the whole thing.
It's that kind of morning.
I did want to go ahead and save space, and I'm not quite sure, because it's not actually a motion to bring an ordinance back. So I'm going to make a motion to hold space for the ordinance, bringing the ordinance back on both December 4th and December 18th. Do I have a second? Yes. Okay.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Hurtek and a second from Councilman Vera. Is there any? I was waiting for your clarification.
The clarification is the subject of the ordinance.
I'm sorry, of raising the multimodal fees, holding a spot for an ordinance regarding
Do you want to
raising multimodal fees. We won't know the amount until we have the conversation on November 20th, and we may end up not moving forward. So I just wanted to have space.
Yeah, it's not.
We're just putting a hold on it.
It's just an agenda. It's an agenda administrative motion. I don't think I have a problem with that.
No, it's unusual for council, but it's certainly not out of order.
The reason,
I understand.
It's a time thing. Normally, this wouldn't be an issue, but I'm saving time because it is a time issue.
No, I appreciate that, Councilwoman Hurtek.
Okay,
We have a motion
thank
from
you,
Councilwoman Hurtek. I believe we had a second from Councilman Vera. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you so much. Okay, that brings that issue to close. Were we nice enough?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just making sure. On to item number 3, and don't let me forget, we do have a speaker online when we get to the public comment.
Good morning.
Right there.
Evan Johnson, Interim City Planning Director, and lucky for you all, I will not be giving the presentation today. I am going, but we are here to talk a little bit about the Sulphur Springs Neighborhood Action Plan, which City Planning's been working on with the consultant team and our neighborhood partners for a year now. We're getting ready. We're working on landing the plane now, and my colleague here, Lauren O'Neill, with our group, is going to come up and give a presentation about what we've done and what we've come up with so far, and we look forward to coming back early next year to talk about even more of the detail. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lauren.
We are so lucky. Hi, Lauren.
Hello. Lauren O'Neill, Senior Planning Coordinator. Thank you for pulling that up. So a little bit of background. The Neighborhood Action Plan is a long-range vision and guiding document for the Sulphur Springs
Can I ask you to
neighborhood.
pause for a second?
Yeah.
We just had a VIP enter the room. Hey, come here. Come here. Come to the podium.
I was trying to sneak in.
Yeah, that's not gonna work. That is not gonna work.
Good morning.
Can you state your name, please? Oh, yeah, can you put the monitor setting to the podium? Thank you. Could you, I don't recognize- Can you state your name, please?
Well, good morning. My name is Naya Young.
No, it's not. It is what? It is Councilwoman.
Oh, you're right. It's a council. 30 hours. I was watching you all back there, and just this is exciting. This is exciting.
And for those of you guys who want to be part of when she actually does officially change her name to Councilwoman, tomorrow in these council chambers at 3 p.m. she will be sworn in as the 7th member of Tampa City Council. Well, make yourself at home. Okay, sorry about that. Okay,
No worries, no worries. Had the opportunity to work with Naya as part of this project in her past life before being a councilwoman. So,
Technically, say your name again. I'm sorry.
okay, Lorna Neal, Senior Planning Coordinator. Okay, so a little bit of background about the project. The Sulphur Springs Neighborhood Action Plan is a long-range vision for the neighborhood. It's a guiding document, and we're really hoping to get out of this actionable strategies, funding priorities, and strengthening the coordination and partnerships that are needed in order to improve the quality of life in the Sulphur Springs neighborhood. So we've been doing this for almost a year now. We came in front of council in April to give you an update at the end of phase 1. We're now at the end of phase 2, and the major deliverable that we're getting out of phase 2 is our actual draft neighborhood action plan. And then phase 3 is going to be all about kind of the review, revision, and finalization of that plan. But we have the next 3 months to make sure that we got it right. So this slide is kind of a high-level summary of the very thorough public engagement that we've done throughout this process. I'm going to spend the next 2 slides talking a little bit more about the in-person engagement. So here, I just want to highlight even the virtual engagement that we've been doing. We have a project website, tampa.gov/Sulphur Springs, where I send out monthly newsletters updating about progress on the project, as well as other work that is being done in Sulphur Springs by other city departments. And then we also had 2 online surveys in phase 1 and in phase 2. And we even did promoted social media ads to really get the word out there about this project, because we're really trying to reach a wide variety of people in the neighborhood. So as part of the kind of official engagement of the project, so the engagement that is literally outlined in our scope, we had 2 traditional community workshops, and we also did booths at 2 non-traditional events, the Literature Festival during spring break, as well as the Back to School Bash, both of which were held at the school. And then in addition to that external engagement that we're doing, we've been engaging a lot internally with other city departments. We held focus groups with each of the administrative portfolios and those department leaders to hear about their priorities and vision for Sulphur Springs. And then on a quarterly basis, we've been meeting with a technical working group made up of staff from those departments. And really the benefit of meeting with that group is that we can create that feedback loop, both of letting them know what we're hearing from the community and then getting updates on what they're working on so that we can tell that back to the community. And then most importantly, really, it's letting us make informed decisions about some of the things that we're gonna move forward in the plan to make sure that we have buy-in and that what we're recommending is realistic. So even maybe more important than the official engagement that we've been doing, we have a really great community engagement consultant that has been out there meeting people where they are at. We're trying to get that comprehensive feedback so that the recommendations that we're making are reflective of everyone in the community, not just those who are gonna traditionally come to community meetings. And I just want to point out that Naya is in a picture up there. So what are some of the challenges that we heard? We heard that there are trouble accessing resources like food and jobs, that there is a lack of high quality, welcoming, safe spaces in the community, and that there's also anxiety about the way that change in the future is going to affect the rich cultural history of Sulphur Springs. So from this, all of this really great feedback that we got through this process, we identified 8 main themes. The themes have to do with beautification, building social capital, preserving natural resources, addressing vacancy, ensuring that there's affordable housing, improving streets, sidewalks, and celebrating history and culture. And I just want to point out the Improved Nebraska Avenue theme. Really, the issues with Nebraska Avenue are kind of addressed by these other broad themes, but it's something that we heard so clearly in our engagement, in comment at City Council, in emails that we received from neighborhood leaders, that we felt that it was an important thing to highlight on its own as a focus area of this project. So from all of that feedback, we developed this vision statement for Sulphur Springs, which states that Sulphur Springs is a resilient, welcoming community where history and progress create a vibrant, sustainable future, serving as a model for community-driven revitalization. And as we're moving through this planning process, we're doing so with these principles in mind. We're keeping in mind safety, preservation, and creating opportunities for prosperity all throughout the neighborhood. So over the next few slides, I'm going to go over our preliminary playbook of actions. These are going to be the top 10 action areas that we really want to push forward within the first year after plan approval. We recognize that, we need a lot of momentum and in some cases more funding to push forward these actions. But we feel that what we're showing you today is really reflective of the feedback that we have gotten over the last almost year. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna keep this a little high level as I go through them, but I'm happy to go back at the end and provide more context or answer any questions that you have about these action areas. But with Advisory Council, this would be kind of that community-led effort that would function as the body for community-driven change in the community. For partnerships, we're looking ways to formalize that collaboration with internal and external partners that are going to help us implement the actions of the plan. Affordable housing, we're looking both to create new homeownership and rental opportunities as well as preserve ones that already exist. For redevelopment, that would be strategic acquisition for mission-based things like workforce development or food hubs. And then on the subject of food hubs, we have heard a lot about how food insecurity is a big issue in the neighborhood. So we want to keep pushing forward programs and policies that are going to encourage fresh, affordable food access. For these next set of actions, the first two really go very hand in hand. It's both about creating the connections between homes, jobs, and community resources, and then making sure that those connections are safe, whether you are walking, biking, driving, or what other method of transportation that you use. For parks and river access, this is really about looking at where we can use new amenities, especially amenities that are gonna connect people to the river, improving the amenities that already exist, like the Sulphur Springs pool, and then really activating our park spaces to make sure that they feel welcoming and safe. We also would be looking at enhancing neighborhood character through public art and urban design, again, to make sure that our public spaces feel welcoming, like a place that people want to go. And then last but not least is safety improvements. This has also been a really big topic that we have heard about throughout this process. We want to be very, very thoughtful about the recommendations we are making around this related to, how police are addressing safety, how are we providing services for the homeless population that's in the neighborhood, and many other things that contribute to whether people feel comfortable and welcome in their own neighborhood. So for this slide, we just wanted to highlight the different topic areas that are all, playing an influential role in this plan. We have staff members from each of these disciplines represented on our technical working group, and we also did a literature review at the beginning of this project that reviewed many of these plans to make sure that what we're doing now is building on the efforts that we have done before. So one thing that was really important to us was making sure that we're not just hearing all of this feedback and sitting on it for over a year and waiting to do something. We did not want to wait to act on this feedback. So we wanted to highlight some of the efforts that have really had a positive, have or will have a positive impact on the neighborhood that have occurred over the course of this project. And this is not us taking credit for these things. Rather, I think a big benefit has been that we have been able to shine more light on Sulphur Springs, and also in some instances, like the kayak launch that was just installed in Sulphur Springs Park. That's something that I can put in my newsletter, and now people know about it, and now they know, hey, the city's listening to what we're talking about. And in addition to that, we're also working really closely with other city departments and community partners to do some of these things that are listed as on the horizon. These are really early wins that we want to get in the community that we think will have a good impact. So our next steps is going to be starting phase 3, where we will be reviewing, revising, and finalizing the draft neighborhood action plan. That's going to include more community engagement as well as staff engagement within the city, again, to really formalize that buy-in and what the implementation process is going to look like. We'd also be looking to kind of get some kind of council blessing on the plan that will help us move forward with implementation, to know that we have your support to start carrying out some of these recommendations. And then after that, we're really looking for a lot of these recommendations to start taking shape over the next 5 years. So we'd be looking at securing more funding, again, formalizing those partnerships, and making the programmatic and policy changes necessary to carry this out. And we are available if you have any questions.
Councilwoman Hurtak, followed by Councilman Vieira.
I'm going to let Councilman Vieira go first because this was his motion.
He actually deferred to you.
Okay.
I gave that to him, but he actually.
Well, the only thing I just wanted to say was thank you for this presentation, and I just want to commend you for 400 plus one-on-one conversations. That's exactly what this community needs. That's what I love the fact that you did a literature review. I mean, these are some really good policies that I hope we use going forward when we're talking about this type of improvement in neighborhoods. But I just wanted to give a quick update because I did talk to Ted Fowler yesterday, and I thank you so much for highlighting the fact that we are going to have a connection with the Green Artery through the park. And so I just wanted to say that the bridge work, they have so I call it in the Manatee zone, like the Manatee viewing bridge, that they have a contractor for that. That is getting started soon, hopefully. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to give me specifics yesterday, but said, but I should have some specifics hopefully next week. But just bridge work, they do have a contract for that. That is getting started. The boardwalk right now is being replaced, the one going under 275. They're replacing some of the boards. That's why it's been fenced off, but that fencing should finish. That is an active project. And then the path completion for the entire circular path through River Tower Park and the connection to both the boardwalk and then Florida and Bird should follow that. So hopefully, I'm hoping, we can get a quick turnaround maybe for the city, maybe summer. So that's the hope. So I just wanted to provide that update, and I just wanted to say thank you because I think that this particular project feeds into items 7 and 8 of what you were talking about, and I'm really thrilled that this is a good way to get started on that, and I'm going to continue to fight for more connection between getting across Florida, getting across Nebraska to get to these parks as part of that Vision Zero. So I have been working with FDOT to try to improve that intersection. that goes from Nebraska to the pool. They're going to hopefully add some ADA compliance there, which would just open up the I guess, inlet for walking of the sidewalk to make it more broad so that people can get there. They're using different mobility devices and bikes and so on and so forth. So that would add to the green artery, but also add a safer connection into the neighborhood itself.
Thank you. Councilman Vera.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And like Councilwoman Hurtak said, the great report. I mean, that's really wonderful. It lays a really good vision and everything like that. I think it's important to do that. I mean, we've seen reports in the past, for example, for University Square area, and then the challenge is, do we fund it? So this is a great roadmap. The issue is, are we going to put money towards it long term? That's the real question, and I know you know that, obviously. That's the real question. My big challenge with a lot of the things that we're doing in Sulphur Springs right now, it's wonderful, but we're looking at a community where 7 in 10 children live in poverty. 70% child poverty. Imagine, living in a community where over 2 in 3 of kids live in poverty. And we're talking about getting them back to the place where they were with the 70% poverty. We're talking about fixing bridges. We're talking about the tower. We're talking about the pool. All great stuff, but we're talking about getting them back to where they were 2 years ago, right? I think we should be having a discussion that forces us to invest in people. I've always said it, that when you take a look at Sulphur Springs, we need to have a robust government agenda with the state government, federal government, local government, coalitions coming together. When I take a look at what I think we need in Sulphur Springs, I got 3 little letters: WPA, Works Progress Administration. Big, robust infrastructure projects that rely on human capital, that put people to work there by rebuilding their communities, giving the youth and the families in those areas real hope that we're putting them to work, we're giving them careers, we're giving them hope in order to rebuild those communities. Without that kind of stuff, I promise you, in 10 years, Sulphur Springs will still be what it is today. I've talked about different ideas, such as a CRA, and the reason I pushed that, and it didn't pass, is because I believe that in areas like Sulphur Springs, if you don't force elected officials to invest in there, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it, because that's how we got to where we're at in Sulphur Springs. And mind you, I've been on city council for 9 years, so I'm not judging anybody, okay? But if we don't force people to invest in areas like Sulphur Springs, then it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen long term. This is a wonderful plan, but the test is going to be, are we going to put robust funds long term to funding that? Again, every government, whenever it comes to impoverished and marginalized areas, the will is not always there. You know why? Because all too often there's no political benefit in elected officials from all over to support marginalized people without public pressure. So if we don't have something like a CRA, then we need to have a public that is going to force people in city council, in county commission, in the state, in the federal government to invest in it, right? I remember the story of President Franklin Roosevelt, who, he talked with activists on a great program that he hadn't come out in favor. He goes, look, I want to do it. Now go out there and make me do it, right? And I think that's what we're looking at in areas like Sulphur Springs. With this city council, we have a lot of good, compassionate people here who want to invest in Sulphur Springs. But I think that long term, we have to have that compulsory type of mechanism to invest in this area, because the political will is not always there for a place like Sulphur Springs. That's the challenge that I see with it, but that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Maniscalco, followed by Councilman Carlson.
Thank you very much. That was a great update, and thank you for all the community outreach and meetings that you've had. I've been here my entire life, and I've seen neighborhoods change, neighborhoods that we never went into because they weren't like they were today. We broke ground for the Riverwalk extension the other day, and I gave a speech, and I talked about, and we just got a grocery store open, and we have new housing down that street, because I remember what Boulevard Homes looked like, Main Street and Boulevard, driving through there. Now it's completely transformed. Okay, you have Tampa Heights. My dad and I used to drive down Tampa Street to get to downtown. We drive right past Tampa Heights, and now you have houses that are worth a lot of money, a lot of people that have put a lot of time and effort in building up that neighborhood, and it's a beautiful neighborhood. Armature Works, Hyde Park, historic Hyde Park was not like it is. 40 years ago, it was not like it is today. And I could keep going. West Tampa, Midtown's development, what's happening in West Shore. I mean, I can go on and on. We've invested a lot of money in a lot of major projects. We have the Fair Oaks Park, we have the Riverwalk, we have the Hannah Building, we have so many things that have happened in the last several years. But in this community, and this is from Joseph Robinson, deceased Joseph Robinson, who was the past president there of the Neighborhood Association, he used to tell me, this is the poorest neighborhood in the city. Those were his words to me, and I met him at Than years ago, in the original Than. And not much has changed. The Kmart closed. I think there was a CVS on Florida and Bush. I think that there were issues there. I could go on and on, but so much of the rest of Tampa has flourished. Here's the thing, as City Council, we've been very supportive. CRA or not, we need to have the discussion of Sulphur Springs. I think it goes up to the mayor, whomever that mayor is. I mean, it's got to be more than a Nehemiah project. You know, houses were torn down and new homes were rebuilt. But beyond that, where's the economic development? Councilmember Vieira talked about the children that are living in poverty. You go through the neighborhoods, cut off Nebraska and go down Waters, go towards Rowlett Park, and you see the neighborhood, and you see where are the grocery stores, where are the retail stores. There are very few small businesses. But what we need to do, because in 18 months we're going to have a new mayor, and it's going to be a bloodbath of an election that I'm not looking forward to. But whomever that mayor is needs to talk about the areas of the city that have been neglected. I mean, you go east of the interstate, I always say it, and you go to East Tampa, and it completely changes. You pass Nebraska and you go down MLK, and it's residential, and it's quiet, but there's so much action and activity elsewhere. The mayor is the spokesperson for the city, the cheerleader for the city, the main contact for the city. We need to cultivate people to come here and look at these neighborhoods, to make investments. The gentleman behind Armature Works, right? I believe he has properties up in Sulphur Springs. He's a good guy. He creates good products. We need more of that, but we need to have the discussion and say, hey, people didn't want to live in Hyde Park 40 years ago. I have a friend that she lived in a house off Bayshore in 1980 because the homeowner begged her and just said, I need somebody to stay in this house because I don't want, I don't know if the term squatters existed, but somebody to just keep an eye on things. Now, I don't even dream about living in Hyde Park Village because it's so expensive and unaffordable, but they preserve the history. Sulphur Springs has a lot of historical buildings. The Harbor House burned down, but if you look at the Springs Theater and that area of buildings, there's a lot of significance. You go to the Sulphur Springs Water Tower, Sulphur Springs itself. Sulphur Springs Arcade was demolished in the late 70s, early 80s. That was a huge loss, but it was replaced by a center that is providing services to the community. So I'll close by saying that we need to make an effort. I didn't come downtown when I was in college 20 years ago because there was very little to see. Now I'm down here every day, not because of work, because, again, the Riverwalk. I mean, the focal point has always been this. What about the poor people? The poor people are always forgotten. And it's up to us as a council, as whomever the next mayor is going to be, to have these discussions to lift these communities out of poverty, because we've been successful in other places that people used to say, I'd never live there. And we never talked about living in Tampa Heights. It was always, oh, we're in West Tampa. I would love to live in Tampa Heights. It's a beautiful area. I would love to live in all these neighborhoods that I've talked about, and Sulphur Springs should be on that list. You have great corridors, Florida, Nebraska, you have the interstate, you have so much connectivity there. We talked about extending the trail there within River Tower Park. People go on the river. We've activated the river. I mean, there's so much going for it. We just need we need that final spark, to get there like all these other neighborhoods have. Thanks.
Councilman Carlson.
I want to say the same thing. Thank you and staff who worked on that. I went to, I think, one or two of the meetings, and I followed what you all have done, and I think it's a great process. You've met lots of people, you've gained information, and I hear positive feedback on that, so thank you for guiding through the process. As we go forward, what happens with some of the projects that get pushed forward is they then get packaged in a marketing way to either make the mayor look good for political reasons or because they sound good with some kind of alliteration. And what I would encourage you to do is to, as you do the communication on it, whoever does the communication, they need to be guided by the community. The community should come up with the names, the words, the language, the graphics, the visuals. It all should be driven by the community. If it's something stupid like transforming Tampa's tomorrow, which people, misinterpret because they use T3, nobody's going to understand what it is. It needs to be something that is a rallying point for the community. A logo, a name, a tagline, those kind of things. They're not marketing tools. They're not political tools. They're tools to rally excitement, esprit de corps in a community. And obviously, from what my colleagues have said and what I've experienced, the community needs it. The second thing is that what also happens with the city sometimes is that they get criticized for not paying attention to certain areas, so they roll in with big outside developers. What happened in the West River is exactly what we don't need to do. We don't need, just because somebody has a friend or relative who's a lobbyist doesn't mean we need to get a big developer to come in and gentrify a whole area. Something like 1,200 poor families were kicked out of that area, and the housing was terrible, but they didn't have anywhere to go for 5 or 6 or more years. And that's not what responsible cities do. Most of the people that were there had to move outside the city limits, and all that did is that worsened their education system problems. It worsened the traffic system. We need to make sure it's better to have mixed use, mixed income housing, but we shouldn't be tearing down affordable housing or places where people live and then replacing them with shiny buildings that look great so we can say we improved the neighborhood, when the reality is that there were hundreds of families that can't even come back because even if they have priority to move back in some of those places. It's not about subsidizing developers. It's not about giving developers opportunity to do something. It's about thinking about the people in the community and doing what they want and they need. The community already has its own nonprofits. We don't need to, and I'm saying this not trying to lecture you, I'm just speaking through the camera, but you know because you've been meeting with them. What happened in East Tampa was not what the community wanted. When we on city council pushed 6-7 years ago that more needed to be done in East Tampa, the administration got outside groups again to go in and fix the problem. That made the community angry because the community said, we already know what needs to be done. We've been sitting here with no resources trying to solve these problems. And the administration said, well, we know better. We're going to pick groups from outside to come in and teach you how to do it. Why did we do that? And some of them even would make a markup on giving money to the existing nonprofits. That is not at all the way to do it. We need to trust the people in the community. We need to trust the apparatus, the organizations the community has created on their own that the community trusts and go in there. An example is the Springs Market. It's just started. They need like $500 each time they operate. And maybe you're doing this already, but if you're talking about bringing food to a community, we don't have to pay $5 million for a developer to come in and build something, or $20 million for somebody to build a Publix. Right now, there's a food market that's coming twice a month or whatever, and for $500 or $1,000, we could help them to sustain that and bring in more people and more resources. And it brings excitement. It brings people in there. It creates a sense of community. The other thing that we don't need, and this is why I appreciate Councilmember Vieira's leadership on this. But the reason why I'm against the CRA is because CRAs have been misused. The way most people look at CRAs is that they're for subsidizing developers. And what I've always said is that if Sulphur Springs wants 20-story high-rise condos, a CRA is the right solution. Otherwise, we need to have discipline in spending the money. And what Sulphur Springs doesn't want is shiny apartments that charge $6,000 a month rent. What they want is better streets, better sidewalks, better parks. There's all these pocket parks that need to be improved. They want the boardwalk fixed. They want the pool fixed. So there are things that we can do. The project that Adam Hardin is about to build, I think, is, I don't know all the details, but I know he has a sensitivity to the history and culture of Tampa, and he's working with people in the community to do that. In terms of right now, in terms of political imperative, I think Councilmember Vieira has led a lot on this issue, but we fully supported him. I think this council, for sure, we have a majority on council that supports this. Now it's up to the mayor, and the mayor's people have to look at this not as a marketing or political opportunity. This is not about adding an extra sentence in the video in a year and a half. It's not about a marketing slogan that you can have a press conference about. It's about us walking into the community and looking in the eyes of the people in Sulphur Springs and knowing that we did the best thing to help them. And they look back at us and say, thank you for supporting us in what we wanted to do to build our own community. And the last thing I want to say is elections have consequences. And so if the public wants to focus on Sulphur Springs, make sure that we keep electing people who care about it. And guess what? The public just elected somebody who cares about Sulphur Springs. So we're going to have another vote on City Council. So on City Council, we definitely have support for Sulphur Springs. Thank you.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whatever probable is possible. However, when I've heard all the conversation today, and thank you and your staff for doing what you've done, a very in-depth, detailed presentation. What happens when you have a system that you go into and you know it needs a lot of help? That's why, again.
Are you okay? I fell. Okay, pardon me.
No, you just lost. You didn't have your glasses on.
Sorry. Most embarrassing.
No. Listen.
What happens when you get a promotion?
They always
long
vote
as you're
for
okay.
Congress when you can't walk.
You always vote for congressmen who can't walk.
Well, I mean, I gotta put some humor to this thing. There's no problem.
Strong Vieira. Strong Vieira.
When we
Workers'
start
comp.
enhancing the area that needs enhancing and needs
Yes.
attention, the problem that we may have, and again, we may have, is what happens when somebody sells a lot that's now it's in the 20s or 30s or 40s or 50 for 150,000. The dynamics of the neighborhood change, and that's a natural occurrence. So then we have to watch out. I don't know how to handle that, I'll be honest with you, unless the city wants to buy some lots and hold them. Because once that starts, the affordability of housing disappears. I can tell you from experience, when I got elected way back in the 70s, Hyde Park was a dump, a real dump. And you can't buy anything now for less than $1 million there, on most of the area. And I wonder if it made a come back like it was originally 60, 70 years ago. But what we have to be careful is how we handle this. Yes, you can do the improvements that you have to do, but once somebody starts their land and somebody else buys it, they're not buying it just to lose money. They're buying for an investment purpose or for them to live in. So how do you balance that? Certainly a private lot owner or homeowner's got the right to sell. That's a natural. So how do we handle that problem when something that's affordable becomes unaffordable for the people that we're trying to help out at the same time? That's the problem. That's going to be a difficult problem to handle. But I appreciate what you're saying, and the president of Sulphur Springs has certainly been demised a lot. However, it's cut by two areas really, Nebraska and Florida Avenue, and then to the east is where you get a lot of the growth. So these are the things that I'm looking at and saying, how can we do both of these things, making it probable and possible with the dynamics that we have to look at. Thank you very much, though.
So I'll close with a couple of remarks. One, some of the conversation makes me very uncomfortable because these areas are filled, they're robust neighborhoods with real people that are enjoying their lives and living their fullest life. Sometimes there's an expectation because, you know, the high-end swank. I mean, I grew up poor, and I grew up in a very, very, very poor area. But I still had a good life, and we had a very basic house that too many people lived in, concrete block with jalousie windows and no air conditioning. But it was still a good life, and not everybody's living in a McMansions. You know, we can still. So I think that the expectation, even when we talk about like Hyde Park, what it was, Hyde Park, even though so it wasn't filled with doctors, lawyers, and CEOs, it was still filled with families. And they may have not been living in a single-family mansion, but maybe they were living in a house that had been divided up in apartments and boarding houses. But those were still real people that were enjoying their lives. And so you see these shifts in neighborhoods of, from once was a vibrant neighborhood of poorer people to now a vibrant neighborhood of very rich people. We can do that to every neighborhood in the city of Tampa, but that's not the proper growth, and that's not the proper trajectory for Tampa. We need to have a city that is inclusive to all people. You know, yes, we have to have places for the the bougie, swanky type of people, but we also have to get people that are just regular people that are going to work in the morning, coming home to feed their kids, and walking to a safe school every day. Sulphur Springs is a great neighborhood. It's a beautiful place in the city, and it's one of the last areas of the city that really does provide relatively affordable housing. So we don't need to reconstruct this. We don't need to could we turn Sulphur Springs into Tampa Heights, or what has become Tampa Heights, or South Tampa, or Hyde Park? We sure could. Should we? Absolutely not. What we need to do is and the best way to ensure that, because you know what, the cost of plywood, the cost of nails, it's expensive. New construction is expensive. You build new construction in the city, people that live in places like Sulphur Springs won't be able to afford to live in those places. We have to retain existing housing stock. The city has to help out people. It has to help out senior citizens. So if you have a senior citizen living in a home that needs a new roof, and can we keep that person in that house and assist them? Can we, if they need new windows, can we do things like that? And guess what? It's a lot cheaper than building new construction. Keeping people in their homes, incentivizing home ownership in these places, that is the future of the city of Tampa that I want to live in. I mean, that's what I want to see. So when we're developing this plan, I really want to see a much more emphasis and a lot more time taken to ensuring that Sulphur Springs remains affordable for the people that live there. We could go in there and do what they did in so many areas of not just the city of Tampa, across this country, and bulldoze these types of housing and rebuild and make it really pretty and glitzy. But that's not a real city. That's not a caring city, and it's not a city that that I want my kids and my grandkids to be raised in. So I look forward to you incorporating that type of thought process into this document as you move forward. And thank you very much for the work. Thank you.
Of course.
Yes, sir.
Know what you're talking about? The working class backbone of Tampa. I'm joking. That's an inside joke.
No, 100%. Okay, very good.
I was wondering, a lot of the things that you guys talked about is things that I actually can provide more detail on at this time as part of those priority action areas. Our draft neighborhood action plan is going to come out next month, and each of the priority action areas will not only have all the detail about what we're recommending there, but they're all also going to be accompanied by case studies to show other places that have successfully done what we're going to be recommending. I wrote down all of your points that I could address, but you can also wait for
I would suggest, in the interest of time,
yeah, absolutely,
that set up individual discussions, between now and the time you bring this back to council, to have those follow-up conversations. Great. And I think that would be the best use of time.
All right, okay. Sounds good. But yes, I absolutely agree with so much of what you all were saying.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody in the public that wishes to speak to this item? Okay, very good. If you would line up against the wall, I'd appreciate it. If you start with your name, and once you get to the podium, start with your name, and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Coffee Leaks. I come before you again, first of all, saying congratulations to our newly elected councilwoman. We're excited, and we look forward to working with her to continue to create a synergy and a strong support for District 5. We're thankful that you all have intentionally heard us through this action plan, and that you have a heart for the community to continue. We want to we have 2 asks and an action item. The first ask is continue to engage the stakeholders, the residents, the providers, and the funders that work in the community. I think as a preacher coming out of East Tampa, I think some of you all were looking at my notes trying to steal from my sermon, because you said exactly what I was gonna say, but I'm gonna reiterate it. My second ask is to ensure that residents actively benefit from the economic, I heard somebody say the 70% is real. So make sure that we benefit from the economic growth that accompanies community transformation. And then we want to let you all continue to eliminate barriers so that we continue to create opportunities for our children and our youth and our seniors and all that live, work, and play. I heard somebody say lift, and when I think of lift, it's loving, investing for future transformation. So continue to lift us. But we want you to invest in our community by empowering our residents, strengthening our families, and building shared economic success. Again, not just what will benefit big developers. That's not what we're looking for. I heard you say there are organizations working. I told you all, I gave you last time I was here, the charter where you all chartered us to be a Sulphur Springs Neighborhood of Promise. I just came back from San Diego with the Harlem Children's Zone. We're a place-based initiative that's been working there. So we've empowered, we have already been working here for years. We just need the support to do a greater work so that our voice will continue to be at the table, and it's not telling us what we need to do or what someone thinks we need to do, but how can we come alongside you and work with you to do those things that you already know. A lady who's dead and gone, Miss Ann Doyle from Devereaux, told me this. She said that any community is an expert at where they live, and they know where they want to go, but our job is to help them create a map to get there, not to try to determine their destination. So continue to help us be vehicles, and we stand alongside you all to do the work. But again, come to us and let's do it together. Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, Connie Burton. I need the prayer of that young guy that opened up this meeting for us. I really do. Because if we had the model coming out of East Tampa, Sulphur Spring would be an easy fix.
Come on, man.
20 plus years with that CRA, and we have witnessed the community and in particular black men's being ran out of our communities. You want to talk about the Riverwalk, you want to talk about Riverfront Park, you want to talk about how beautiful West Tampa is. You know how it had to get there first? Black people had to be excluded. Now we're gonna have to tell some real truth, and we might have to have a bloodbath before the next election so we can stop thinking that black people is expendable. We are not. When you want to talk about cosmetic changes, the first thing that I noticed is economic opportunities. It was promised in East Tampa once you tore down all of Ponce de Leon and all of College Hill, and you know who couldn't get a job there? Black men. And all them beautiful babies in Sulphur Springs, guess what they got? Black daddies. You might not never see them, but they got them. Got black uncles, black brothers, black that need jobs and opportunities. So you have an opportunity of making Sulphur Spring better. If not, what we're gonna have a consternation of what we see right now. Houses in beautiful Tampa Heights that nobody can afford. Beautiful scenery in West Tampa that because he the nephew and the cousin of somebody, that's how they get the contracts. Our people are not touching nothing. And when we come to you and say, you know what, if you could just give some black youth an opportunity, all you can come back with 32 little old lousy jobs for the summer. But every week, all of you have an opportunity. When you look at that agenda coming from transforming Tampa for today, for tomorrow, that BS, you could look at that agenda and say, how do then it incentivize opportunities and then force some of these developers that's walking away with these $1 million contracts to hire some people coming out of Sulphur Springs, coming out of East Tampa, coming out of Highland Pine, coming out of Grant Park. What we have in our community is a boatload of hopelessness. You know why? Because all of the broken promises, all the election rhetoric that we constantly hear, and then we asking people to participate in the process. 100% people could have participated in this last process, only 11%. No indictment against the candidate, but because of the footprint that politicians before them has placed on our community.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next speaker, please.
Good morning, Stephanie Pointer. You know, this plan it's beautiful. I'm glad to see it moving forward. Here's the problem. The problem is you were presented a month ago with the last plan to help a community. Actually, it was two communities, SOG and Palmetto Beach. Now, SOG has gotten a lot of what they needed. Why? Because Carol Ann Bennett and I are a pain in the behoons. and regularly, and will continue to be. But what has Palmetto Beach gotten? They got half of a 5-minute presentation last month to you guys. Lauren took part in that study. So I know, I believe she knows what she's doing. But I need to point out to you, where is the money going to come from for these communities? Well, I would challenge you that last month you got a letter from a land use attorney that was submitting a reply to the state for a comp plan amendment. It said in that letter that there's less than 2 acres and less than 2% of Channelside that is available to be redeveloped. Why is it still a CRA? If it can't be redeveloped, it's time to put that money back into the general fund so that we can do the good stuff that we need to do in Palmetto Beach and we need to do in Sulphur Springs. Those folks in Channelside have plenty. Why is it that we are supporting and supplanting Channelside when they only have, it's either less than 2%, it's like 1.9 acres or 1.2 acres, but either way, that's not enough for us to continue to dump all of our general fund into that community. When we have folks who need it, who are starving for need, it's not fair. When do you guys, and it's your responsibility to say, it's time. We've done what we needed to do in Channelside, and it's time to start paying attention to those who need it the most. And I'm not talking about SOG. I'm talking about the community that you got a 2.5 minutes worth of their time talking about last month, and they didn't even know it was on the agenda because nobody was here. Here we are today. Sulphur Springs needs it. East Tampa needs it. Why are we still continuing to waste our resources in Channelside when all of this is going in? Where's the teeth going to be? I'm going to tell you that Coastal Area Action Plan, one of the former bigwigs in the city told me specifically that they wanted to see specific items in the comp plan that would address these issues, and these folks need to do the same. They left it out of that plan, but we need to see specific items in the comprehensive plan that demand that these folks are taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Robin Lockett. I love the plan, but I am very concerned, and everything is nice and pretty, right? The exterior, but what about the interior? You have slum landlords with properties that are outdated and they're not taken care of. How does that look? How do you incentivize them to take care of their property or sit code enforcement on them like you do in East Tampa, or like it's done, not like you guys do it, but like it's done in East Tampa, right? So something has to be done in regards to that, because when development comes in, and a large percentage of Sulphur Springs, to my knowledge, are renters. How does that look? So we can have all these plans, and when they make a decision to sell, change, or get rid of, we're gonna be right back at the drawing board, because a lot of properties will be that. In regards to developers and building new properties and that price, that value being large or increased, I was an appraiser. What you will find is appraisers will get a new house, go across that river to pull the comps to get the value. And once that property is identified as a qualified sale, then it's on, and that's how the prices increase. It is the mayor's responsibility. Once you guys approve it, I am looking forward to council holding the mayor accountable. If you know that you're approving this and you recognize that something is not being done, either by the voices of the community coming up and saying, hey, these things are not moving, then it's up to you to, you have a responsibility to hold the mayor, whoever the mayor is, if it's the current mayor now, the new mayor coming in, hold them accountable. Bring them back up here and question and keep drilling them. But there has to be a connection between the two, accountability on your part and the mayor's part. But my biggest thing I wanted to just talk about and identify is there's something that has to be done with the landowners of the apartments or the rentals that's in that community, because that's going to be a big factor in Sulphur Springs being the beautiful community, or remaining to be the beautiful community that it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, that concludes. Oh, you got another one?
Oh, good.
I dropped my bag.
Oh, good.
You didn't fall through the door.
Good morning, my name is Nai Young. Well, one, great job, Lauren and Evan, on the presentation. I think with anything, it's going into anything new, it's always great to have a plan. Always good. It's always great to have a plan. So I think this is a great just first step for Sulphur Springs. Listening to you all's comments, I'm happy to hear that there is some kind of consensus amongst council members that we know that Sulphur Springs needs some type of investment. We need to pay attention to Sulphur Springs. So I'm happy to hear that. We have an opportunity to really do something really great here, to really show like you can put some investment in the community and you don't push people out. But I think we have to go about that carefully, continuing to keep community at the forefront of it. I will tell you, this is a community that is very proud of where they live, that is very proud of the history of the community, that wants to see this investment, that wants to be a part of the process. And I think we lean into that and really empower those individuals and empower the community to make sure that they are at the forefront and they can be the ones that I think it was Councilman Carlson saying, this is not a political play. Like, this is the community. They can come and say, we were a part of this from the beginning to the end, and we are going to get to stay here and be here. So we really have an opportunity to do something great in this community and really lead by example and show that you can put investment into a community and still have people that live there. I live in Tampa Heights, so I've seen the growth. I've seen how it's changed. I worked in nonprofit. I've seen all of my families that have had to move because they couldn't afford to live in the community anymore. So I've seen it happen. But I think that we have an opportunity to make sure that doesn't happen in Sulphur Springs. And I think it's really gonna, again, make sure that we are, of course, we're holding, those accountable that are gonna be, responsible for making sure that we get this investment in the community, and then also working amongst ourselves and working together that we make sure, again, that we do not, that we don't push people out. I really feel like we have a great opportunity to show how it can be done in Sulphur Springs, and we can be a model for that. So I'm really excited to see this, put forward, and I'm really excited to really get the community involved in the process. The quote you said earlier, they are the experts of where they live. They live, work, and play here. So they know, and they want to be involved. So I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this pans out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes public comment. Oh, shoot, I'm sorry, I forgot. Michael, I totally forgot about you. Mr. Randolph, can you hear me?
You almost forgot about me.
I almost forgot about you. Shame on me. I'm sorry.
My name is Michael Randolph. Good morning. I'm here to offer some input on the Sulphur Springs plan and to commend Mr. Adams for his visionary leadership in advancing his community. He represents what I call a new school, next generation thinker. Someone who, alongside with the community shareholders, is working to transform the Sulphur Springs community from the bottom up. I also want to recognize the city for its plan and development this plan, as that plan focuses on improving public facilities, expanding amenities, and enhancing overall quality of life. While this standalone plan has potential to attract new investors, it also raises the likelihood of gentrification and displacement if it's not managed correctly. Let's talk about socioeconomic content. Sulphur Spring is one of the lowest poverty concentration communities in Tampa. With 45% of the residents living below the level. This is twice the rate for the city of Tampa as a whole. A significant portion of the population is working, but they're still unable to meet their needs. Let's talk about an equity strategy. To address these challenges, we must use a social economic strategy grounded in displacement risk assessment tools that includes identifying vulnerable census tracts of residents, commercials, and coastal displacement. Second, fill the critical gap in the Tampa housing, Tampa planning infrastructure. Unlike cities like Seattle and Portland, Tampa currently lacks a composite index and systematic mapping of displacement risks. This was an opportunity to not revitalize a neighborhood, but to do so in a way that centers on dignity, inclusion, and economic development opportunity. This, along with the community benefit agreement and opportunity zone, offer a new opportunity for self-esteem. The West Tampa CDC and the Center for Nonprofit and Community Development stands ready to assist not only in the development of this plan, but more importantly, to identify the funding sources to make it happen. Thank you.
As always, thank you, Michael. Appreciate your insight. Now that concludes public comment. We are going to move on to our last item of the workshop, item number 4.
Good morning, Council. Susan Johnson-Velez, Legal Department. Item number 4 is for the staff presentation or presentation by the Downtown Partnership, who Council requested work with staff to come up with design guidelines for large format digital media within the central business district. So the motion originated back in March of this year, and in the ensuing months, I know I and Ms. Feely have worked with the Downtown Partnership staff. We are, in the middle of the process now to create those design standards, and I'm happy to introduce this morning. We have President and CEO of the Downtown Partnership, Ms. Kenyatta Hairston-Bridges, who will be here to give council an update on where we are with the process and kind of the timeline going forward in developing these standards.
Good morning. Good morning, Kenyatta.
Good morning. Good morning, Council. My name is Kenyatta Hairston-Bridges, President and CEO of the Tampa Downtown Partnership, and I'm joined by my colleague, Casey Bauer. He's our Planning and Research Manager. And the partnership, we're happy to be here. On behalf of the partnership, we're happy to be here, and we want to thank you for allowing us to provide you with a brief update, and also to request to come back for a workshop after we get through our first and second stage. At the Tampa Downtown Partnership, our mission is really to continue to champion the vibrancy and growth of Tampa's downtown. And we do this by convening stakeholders, embracing innovation, as well as nurturing downtown neighborhoods. And so in giving consideration of our mission, we think that the partnership is well positioned to lead conversations around the development of large format digital signs in Tampa's downtown. As you may recall, and as Susan indicated, there were previous conversations at this body earlier this year around this topic, and during that time, our former councilwoman, Gwendolyn Henderson, made a motion that requested the Tampa Downtown Partnership to develop comprehensive guidelines around large format. Following that motion, there was another motion at the CRA board to contribute funding that would allow us to commission the design guideline study. Since that time, we've had a selection committee that was stood up, and the selection committee reviewed 3 competitive proposals, and Gensler was selected as the consultant to support the future of the design guidelines. Since that time, Gensler and the partnership has moved forward with a 3-phased approach That includes a discovery phase, a define stage, as well as a design stage. We've initiated the discovery stage, and during the discovery stage, we've had the opportunity to do some preliminary research. We've evaluated other cities, and what we discovered is that several cities have adopted these signage districts to enhance the urban experience in their core. And examples include Atlanta, San Antonio, Boston, and downtown Denver. We've also began to do some research in terms of establishing areas of interest in downtown. And we had the opportunity to host several meetings, several discovery meetings with some of our private partners, our public partners, and our nonprofit partners. And this includes FDOT, it included THEA, various City of Tampa departments, our cultural institutions, as well as our downtown stakeholders, also our Special Service District Committee, and then, like I said, we held some downtown site visits. From these meetings, we learned some early things around best practices, and looking at those best practices, we learned that not only are communities using this for community messaging, but it becomes a significant tool to reinvest in the community from a community benefit standpoint, especially when you pair it with arts and you pair it with public realm improvements such as investments in the quality of life of the parks. You see this become a substantial tool for community reinvestment. And that can take shape when you're looking at the arts in a number of ways. It can take shape in murals and sculptures, increased lighting that increases safety, as well as, like I mentioned, public realm enhancements. But I think what is really important is some of the early takeaways that we learned, which my colleague, I would like my colleague Casey to just give an overview of the early takeaways that we learned, and then we'll wrap it up with a timeline.
Casey Bauer, Downtown Partnership. These early takeaways that we've had from these discovery meetings include that FDOT will have some play in this. We have several state roads in downtown Tampa, including Tampa, Florida, Jackson, Kennedy, as well as Nebraska. In Florida statute, Chapter 479 has some limitations on outdoor off-site advertising, including the oversight on signs within 660 feet of those roads, transition times, as well as their restrictions on full motion videos, as well as sign spacing for 1,000 feet on state roads. All these preliminary conversations, a key takeaway that we've had so far is that management and oversight of the signage is just as important as the look, feel, and location of the signs. And again, we've been told that this must look and feel like Tampa. We are determined to make sure that this cannot become a Times Square-esque visual kind of how it appears to the general public. There's concerns over the proximity and orientation of residential and how we address future residential. Downtown's changed over the last 20 years from primarily office to now over 20,000 residents. As well as we must consider the proximity to historic properties, how enhanced lighting can also improve safety and the perceptions of safety, the operating hours that must reflect that downtown is a place where people live, work, play, visit, and learn, and as well as that signs are generally best not to be on historic properties or vacant structures.
So that was kind of what we've learned in the discovery phase. As we move forward, we're now moving into the define stage, where we began to look at different concepts and really define how this should look in Tampa's downtown. And so I'd like to provide an overview of our timeline. As I mentioned, back in September, we kicked off with Gensler, and that kicked off the discovery stage. We've held our first stakeholder meeting on October the 23rd to get stakeholder feedback. But as we go into the define stage, this stage is going to be really heavy on community input. Our first community input meeting or public meeting is on November the 17th at the Portico. Following that meeting, we will hold a series of smaller outreach sessions within the neighborhoods, with property owners and community groups, followed by a second community input meeting in December, which will take feedback from the first community meeting and provide revisions and report back out to the community. Following that, we will enter into the design stage, wherein we will present findings and draft guidelines to city staff and work with city staff on that, followed by a workshop to this body to present the findings, recommendations, and the draft guidelines. Thank you, Casey. And consistent with these, with the timeline as well as the phases, our hope for the desired outcomes is that we will have a sign district, if it's allowed, that reflects the community in its concepts and its standards. There will be consensus around the signage district and preferred opportunity placements. There will be a ratio for arts programming and placements, and that we will come to consensus on the total number of installations to be allowed. With that, I'd like to end the presentation and open it up for any questions you may have.
Councilwoman Hurtado.
I'm just looking at when we could put a workshop on.
Can you leave the last slide up, because I have a question about mine.
Yeah, I have a question about quite a few of these slides. First of all, if we could get a copy of the presentation, that would be great. So the first thing that I wrote down, because I did not hear you say it, you talked about stakeholders, but the word neighborhoods was not in there. I know you're doing public outreach, but you need to add the neighborhood associations to your list of stakeholders. Maybe you did do that, and I didn't understand that, but that's key. You're going to want to reach out to each neighborhood association and have a meeting with each neighborhood that's in the downtown area. I mean, I know you know those neighborhoods, but I just want to, that's going to be key for me. These are just a couple of things that I wrote down. When we're talking about vacant buildings, I think we need to have a percentage of the buildings that are occupied. I don't want somebody who's had a vacant building for 60 years to open 1,000 square foot spot and say, ooh, it's occupied. So we need some guidance around what occupied means. And then I would like to be invited to meetings. If obviously you have that timeline, I'd like to make sure that we get the invites as well. I have a question about the second part of this motion, which was a draft ordinance. That is not your responsibility, but I am going to ask staff to talk about that today.
Okay.
My question is consensus. That's an interesting word. I don't think that's doable. I don't know what, I know it's a buzzword people like to throw around, but in this sense, I mean, what are you looking for? What's consensus? What does that mean to you? Consensus around signage district and preferred opportunity placements.
So for us, it's consensus around the area. I know that the map that was previously discussed, it showed two separate areas. It showed the convention center area as well as the cultural center area. That's still the map that we're looking at, with a little greater of a footprint in the north end of the downtown. But we want to make sure that the outcomes here is really driven by the community and what they've determined the area that they would like to see these signs in.
So that's all input. I think that when you get down to because the decision point is 4 votes. So that's Councilwoman Hurtado.
Councilwoman Henderson made it very clear that we were not to have districts, that it was supposed to be all the central business district.
Well, that was my that was going to be my next statement.
I mean, I'm sorry, I remember her very clearly.
My next statement is I would not start with a paradigm of of anything. I think you need to bring the highest and best product that you can, and justification, and whether that boils down to 1 or 2 districts or more or whatever it looks like. But I wouldn't necessarily make any assumptions going into this in your role in doing it. And again, good luck with consensus. I think getting a sense of a temperature is probably when you're out there is good. But then, of course, coming to the approving authorities, it's a majority. But the other thing on the vacant buildings, garages needs to be called out as something a specific use, because that's a different thing. So if we could put things on garages. Well, I don't know. Is it? I don't know if I think they're unique enough about the usage is so unique that it's interesting to call them out as a unique structure and what. And what they do and what they are. Councilman Carlson, you had something?
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you for the work on that presentation. I'm glad you're using the word signs. There was a lot of misinformation pushed out in the beginning of this that it was billboards, and just want to make clear to the public it's not billboards, it's signs. And until you're done with your study, we're not going to know exactly what it looks like. I mentioned that I was in several countries over the summer, one of them in Dubai. these signs were everywhere. Every store had them. Every store in the mall had them. Every place had them, and it didn't look gaudy like Times Square. It was just another kind of signage. Just like years ago we had neon, and then we had backlit signs, and now there's these LED or whatever signs. So I think when you present maybe the next round, maybe you could give some examples of the texture of what it might look like. And so that people can see what it because they think it's going to be, a huge wall, and it's going to look like a billboard. But to me, it would be more placemaking. I understand also that there may be certain government buildings or government restrictions that would restrict it from going in certain places, and I think that's one of the reasons not to have districts. But if there's an emphasis somewhere, then we need to make sure that it's going to be allowed. You mentioned city staff. City staff have expertise in a lot of things. I don't know that we have an expert specifically in this area. If I were you, I would, because this is a request of city council, not the administration, I would, and I think the administration to some extent disagrees, I would think of the staff as one of the publics you have to get input from, but you should not take direction. It's more important, from my point of view anyway, what the public thinks, how the neighborhoods want it to be signed, how the businesses want to be signed in downtown, the people that are actually stakeholders in it. And if you're benchmarking, look at other cities that have done it successfully and how they've handled it, and come back to us and show us what it looks like and the regulations they put in and everything. Also, I would say, I've heard lots of rumors about opposition kind of lurking in the grasses in the area, but not coming out and talking about it. I wish whoever is opposed to it, come stand on the podium and tell us who you represent, and talk about why you're against it and what you want in it. I would, and if anybody calls your office at the Downtown Partnership, I hope you'll tell them the same thing, and I hope the city staff will tell them that. If people are opposed to it, they should send emails to city council specifically saying who they represent and why they're opposed to it, and also come before city council and speak. It shouldn't be happening in the shadows. It should be all public. And the last thing is that there's a strong feeling by many people in the public that somebody in the city gave an exception to the arena, and the people who go to the arena for games love it. The people who feel like it's shining in their windows don't like it. And I understand that one of the buildings in Waterworks is going to get the same thing. Whatever we have coming back, I really would like the legal department to come back and tell us what those agreements are, how they came about. Was there an RFP? What specifically was allowed? Are the rules being followed? And who gave the authority? I don't remember as city council that we voted on that. And so I would like to see, for full disclosure and transparency in the public, who approved it, why, how, what were the regulations? Are those regulations being followed? Because now that precedent has been set, that's why we have these other folks coming through the door asking for all these other signs. And it's not fair if somebody gets a huge sign because a staff person approved it, but anybody else who wants one has to go through a complicated process to get it. Thank you.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for your work. We've obviously talked about this and everything. I think this, if done right, can enhance downtown. I think something that Councilwoman Lynn Hertak said is important, which is obviously, we've talked about this, I know you're doing this, but that downtown, talking to the folks that live there, obviously, which obviously you guys are doing, and I know I'm preaching to the choir in that regard. I do think it's good to, we could talk about having this in specific areas. There's also an argument to spread it thin, right? And to look at different areas for that. Having it in specific areas, I think may end up having more of a concentration that maybe some community members wouldn't like out there. So that's something that I think we should explore, obviously. I also would be, I hate to point someone out in the audience, I would actually, eventually be interested in seeing what Councilwoman-elect Nia Young thinks about this, obviously, being the council member for this area. But for me, again, if done properly in conjunction with neighborhoods, this is something that can enhance downtown, which is why y'all are on it. So, so I think that it's, by and large, going in the right direction, but we have to, direct that. In terms of other buildings having signs, I've said this from the very beginning, I want to focus on what's ahead of us. I support this. I don't want to get distracted on other things involving other entities and so forth. I think that's going to distract us, and I fail to see the relevancy. I think that how shall I say it? We have a path ahead of us, and if we go down that path, we can get something that's very good for downtown. And that was my concern early on, which is that we were kind of going off in different directions. I think if we stay on a right path, we can do this in a way that can enhance downtown if done right. Thank you.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Thank you very much. So, the difference from the downtown that was and the downtown that is the amount of residents that lived here and all the new residents that are coming in. We have towers going up, and we see the population growth the last several years. But Councilmember Carlson mentioned a word that triggered something here, and that is neon. And I have a picture here, and I'm happy to put it up, but this is Franklin Street in 1956, and downtown was full of neon. Different time, different era. Now they're, these digital signs. But, from this color photograph, it was lit up at night. It was vibrant. Downtown was busy. Downtown is coming back it is that vibrant downtown, and it's just going to keep getting better. But this time, instead of just businesses, we have people that live there, people that are going to see this. But I think it can be done in good taste, looking at the central business district, not creating a concentrated area, because Times Square is a concentrated area, and you have, overwhelming stimulation. But if done right, I think this could work. So that's it. Thanks.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the first time this came up, I voted against it, and downtown became downtown without neon signs, so I still will vote against it. Downtown has been a remarkable recovery, and it didn't have signs in every corner and every building. That's what you're going to get. And it just, once you start this, you can't stop it. I've been here for a little period of time when we had to give up working up with the sign individuals. They had to give up 4 basic signs for 1 neon sign all around the interstate and all around the city of Tampa, and that took a long time to do, 6, 7, 8 months to accomplish that. But it was done, and I don't want that to come back. That's all. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Yes, thank you. So I did want to ask staff about the draft ordinance. That was part of this motion.
Susan Johnson, Velez Legal Department. Yes, ma'am.
Where is it?
Well, it's really difficult, impossible to create a draft ordinance without some design guidelines, without knowing kind of what the parameters are, getting some direction from council about who's going to control the permitting of these things, what the standards are going to be for evaluating them, what the size limits are, lighting limits are, placement limits are. So all those are going to need to be incorporated into any ordinance amendment that we bring forward to council. So really, this is the first part of the effort, but we can't draft an ordinance without these design guidelines. And since I'm standing up here, I do feel compelled to remind council, and I know that we talked about this in prior presentations at workshops to council, but signage is kind of a tricky thing. It's not just simply a land use issue, and it's not just how these things are going to look. The signs are going to have content on them. There are First Amendment implications to all signage, and government has a very limited ability to control the content once we decide to allow signs. And so I'm going to keep reminding council of that at the risk of being called a broken record like I was yesterday by someone on the dais who shall remain nameless.
Me.
Okay, well. But so I did want to just remind council of that. So that is something we're going to be taking a very careful look at as we move forward in the process of drafting and continuing to work with the Downtown Partnership on the design guidelines and on the ordinance amendment that we'll bring forward to council. But I do want you all to continue to keep that in the forefront of your mind, because what we don't want is to have content appear as a result of this that some might find offensive, or that we are not wanting to introduce into downtown, but then not have the ability to control that.
I thought that was the whole point of involving the Downtown Partnership.
Well, the design guidelines are one part of that, but again, determining how the program is going to be run. That's also an integral part of it, and those are some of the things that we are still researching and reviewing so that we can incorporate those, but it might make a difference depending on who's going to control the signage, who's going to control permitting, and so forth.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm going to put my preference out there, and it's what Councilwoman Henderson asked for, was that it encompass the entire CBD. Like that. I thought we had all already agreed on that. So I mean.
Is there a motion?
Yeah. If we have to make a motion again, I'll make a motion to make sure that it involves all the CBD.
Well, I'm sorry, to the extent that, I mean, I think Ms. Hairston Bridges and Mr. Bauer have kind of presented some limitations in terms of kind of where the CBD is situated in terms of state roads and
Well, I think with that, I think that's a subset of the clarification. So I think that's
those limitations.
Yes, but those limitations will be dealt with at the time. But we're saying that she made a very good argument about including the entire CBD, and so I think we just need to go forward with the parameters of we're looking at the whole CBD.
So we have a motion from Councilwoman Hurtak, a second from Councilman Viera. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And then.
Ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you. Just also, I mean, if we want to limit, we can talk about like a number. So, 15 to 20 signs, something like that we could then augment over time if council needs. So if instead of specific areas, we go for a number, that allows for the change in building that others have talked about here, because downtown will change. Some of those buildings may not have signs anymore, some will, and because of the state roads. I know that some state roads in some areas of downtown, we're looking to acquire to make a city instead of, I know we're kind of talking about Nebraska in certain areas and things like that. So so that will evolve over time. So by not limiting to a specific place and kind of just being able to work with whatever the parameters are, because who knows what state law will come up with next. So that is something that I also think, so look at numbers instead of that. And then, I would really love to see the guidelines. I know that you're looking at the guidelines. You mentioned the cities that you're looking at before. We do not need to reinvent a wheel. So let's look at what those have done and see how we can fit them to what we are trying to do.
So also, I think
know that sounds very simple, but just about all the cities that were mentioned in the presentation, I know we have mentioned them in prior presentations, but each city has taken a slightly different approach, so there's not a uniform kind of one-size-fits-all to the way these are done. So we're taking a look and trying to figure out which setup is best for the city of Tampa.
Okay.
I also think those restrictions that you spoke about on the state roads, I think that may be overly broad, because I'm sure their intent is, billboard forward, street-facing type of signage.
Or
so I imagine
highways.
if we go to it, we probably can find exceptions to that as well. But I need one more clarification for you.
I'm not done.
Hold on a second, because for the record, I need you to come to the podium and state your name for the clerk, please. Yeah, yes.
Casey Bauer, Tampa Downtown
Thank you.
Partnership.
Very good. Thank you.
So my, I know that maybe more people want to talk, although I think most of us have. I want to say that I would like for this to come back at the February 26th workshop session, just for an update, if not as close to as possible. But what I would like to include in that is a one-page synopsis for each of the cities that you're looking at. So just a little bit of background for us on what those cities are doing. And maybe some things like best practice, something that you like from all of those as we're cobbling this together. Again, I would also like each council member to have a one-on-one meeting with you before that session, just so we kind of so you all can do a little more deep dive with us on each of those cities. Because, we should be very close. We should be able to have an ordinance by the time that you come back. Even if not done, we should be able to have that being cobbled at the same time.
You want to ask for the ordinance to come as a draft ordinance to be presented at
Well,
that point?
but Mrs. Susan Johnson Velez made a point about it might be difficult to do that, but I do want, but as an update, like where we are in that building process of building an ordinance. So not just, I'll restate this. So my motion is for you all to come back in February 26, 2026, including the cities that have those sign ordinances already, points that we're looking at for the ordinance, and providing one-on-one updates with council members 1 to 2 weeks prior.
So we have a motion from Councilwoman Hurtak. We have a second from Councilman Maniscalco. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you.
And I did notice that you're not done until January 29th with your stuff, which is why we're asking for an update. That's why the update is important. We're not asking for, we don't expect you to have it all together, but just an update then about where we're going, how far we've gone, like those types of stuff. So I do appreciate it.
And can I add one clarification?
Say your name again.
Yeah, sorry, every time you talk, you have to say your name.
Okay, Kenyatta Harrison Bridges, Tampa Downtown Partnership. I just want to add one clarification as it relates to the study area. I don't think we can see it on the screen.
We see it, but.
Oh, you see?
There we go.
So this is the study area. So I don't want you guys to think that we're limited to certain areas. This is the entire study area, which is really the north end of downtown. There are restrictions or limitations, but we'll work within those limitations, as Casey mentioned. But this is the study area.
In case of our Tampa Downtown Partnership, to add to that and to just clarify, while we have the study area, we want to make sure that the community is heard. We've had our stakeholder meeting on the 23rd, but our public meetings will start on November 17th. And then that correction is not the day after Christmas, even though I love being in downtown Tampa. It will be in December 2025. So just to clarify that for the public record, that we will have that second public meeting at least 2 weeks after that first public meeting, after we make all those revisions. And we want the community to have input on what this area is. So we didn't want to get too far ahead of that where we're saying here, not here. We want to make sure that we hear from the neighborhood associations, from the residents, from the stakeholders about where they believe this should be.
And my parting comment is going to be on what some others have touched on, in that the option is not no signs. So I really want to make sure that the public understands that. And what, staff may disagree, but in my opinion, we already opened the box. And so now it's how to manage it. And so I think Councilman Carlson made that really good point, that this has already been opened. So we just need to figure out how to manage it going forward. And that's what the conversation needs to be about. So I hope that you set that conversation when you start it with the public. And that to me is very important. Because sometimes we get surveys where people are just like, I don't want any of those. Well, that's not an option here because of what has been done prior.
Thank you. Councilman Carlson?
Yeah, two things. One is, just to clarify, this is not my issue. This is not something that I would have brought up. It's not something that's at all on my priority list. But as a collegial body, we try to support each other. And the council member who was leading this effort as one of her top priorities passed away. We couldn't talk to her about this because it's under sunshine. My sense is that she was very frustrated for some reason about this. If anybody has background on why she was frustrated, you can let me know now. But there seemed to be some frustration. But I just want everybody to know this is not something I'm trying to do, except in honor of her request, which there are other requests that we're moving forward. The second thing is, as we talked about, there already has been a precedent set because there's one or two that were approved. And I really would like to know what has been approved. And as other folks were talking here, I wonder, there's one that's up that's on the arena, and maybe that was done as an exception because it's just like a football stadium, a hockey arena, it can have that. But if there are others that are approved that we don't know about or the public doesn't know about, I think we need to bring that to the surface. And so It could be that there are none others that are approved. But what I would request, if possible, is I'd like to make a motion for a written report adjacent on February 26th from legal that lists the currently approved and active digital signs allowed in downtown, copies of the contract or approval documents, and a description of who and how they were approved. There may be 20 of these in downtown, I don't know. I've had this written down for the clerk, but if we approve it, but I'm not picking on anyone. I just don't know how many there are, what was approved or why. And if there's some process that's already operating, I think we need to bring that to the surface to go parallel with this.
I thought we'd already had a report about this. We already talked about it.
We've talked about it, but we haven't had a report of signs that might be in the works or signs that are ready. Because I would also love to know how the ones on Amelie got passed. I mean, I know that they kind of did explain that, but I'd like to see the documents, though.
Is there a second or?
Yeah, I seconded it.
Oh, second.
So we have a motion from Councilman Carlson, a second from Councilman Hurtak. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is that done?
Yeah, we're done.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am.
Nia Young. Not long. I just want to, I think one thing that is important, between whether you're thinking about Tampa or District 5, every community has its character and what makes it unique. And so I think it's really important. And again, I just have like general questions about it, because again, it's something new. So there, you want to have the background on, has it been done already? What was the outcome of it? How does it look? I know like myself, I'm a visual person, so I need to see and look and say, what's the size? Where is it? All of these things. And I think the public would also appreciate that too. Seeing actual examples could really help, because sometimes reading, the verbiage could be a little bit, a little difficult. And Councilman Hurtak, you said, we've already opened that box, so we need to figure out how to manage it. And I think that's really, really important. The can of worms has already been opened, but managing it and making sure that it doesn't get to a point where now we're, in a place, 5 or 10 years from now, and we can't do anything about it. I too also just have questions as far as the what goes on the signs. I think that's something also that I would really, just council should really look at. And also, well, I had something else written down. Well, I'll just say that's it. Just overall, just questions. And then the public, I think it's going to be really, really important to hear from the public. So those, the workshops that you're going to do are extremely important, and I would just, encourage and urge make sure to get the word out so that people actually attend and that you actually can hear from people who are going to be, the ones that are going to be looking at these signs every day. They live there. And we just heard a quote, from a community member, community are the experts in where they live. And so we should absolutely hear from them and hear what they have to say, so then we can go and make a sound decision. So that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Young. I already know what needs to be on all of these signs, the Alan Clendenin pants.
Oh, my gosh.
They should be animated too. They should be dancing pants. They should be dancing pants.
When you get a truck in front of City Hall, you made the big time.
Then I know I made it, exactly. Okay, we have concluded our business for the day. We are now to new business. Councilman Carlson. Wow, Councilman Vera.
I had
the full. How many commendations?
Oh, no, I just have one here. It is, I'm trying to find it here, I'm so sorry. Oh, yes, okay. In response to a written report on the K-Bar Ranch Park, it was submitted to us, I guess, last week. I motioned that design criteria specifically state, well, you know what, guys? May I go last? Let me review this. I apologize.
You may go last.
Thanks.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Mine is just Mr. Shelby, are you going to be?
It's on my list too. So.
Okay. Okay, well, I have to run and get my phone then, because for a calendar.
Or we could talk about it
No.
preliminarily and do it
Let's do it
tonight.
now.
Okay.
Let's do it now.
Now, we're awake.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point.
Mr. Maniscalco.
One of our colleagues is having a birthday on Saturday, and I just want to wish him a very happy birthday.
Which colleague would that be?
I don't know. Anybody? No?
I don't know either.
No? Well, happy early birthday, Councilmember Miranda. That's it.
Councilman Miranda, it's 100 and what? 162. Is that a good day? Is that a good year? Was that BC?
I met a
Or
friend today
was
that's
that 162 AC or BC?
He's 102.
Charlie's birthday Saturday. Okay, so happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
I never had a
to
song.
you.
Don't know.
Happy birthday, Councilman
Don't ruin my
Miranda.
day. I caught you, didn't I?
Are you going to be 41 or 51?
I'm going to be 185.
He's going to be 58 back.
Okay, Councilman Miranda.
I have a couple of things. First of all, another bill came in from TICO for this month coming in, and I'm just going to turn it in and make a copy of it, give them the copy, but I will turn it in. It's a total of $16.03.
I should run my line to your meter.
Well, we can have, but the cost to get there is expensive.
But
That's,
just a question for you. So my electric bills have gone up at least 20%. Do you find yours have gone up?
well, what happened here, this, in the back side, it tells you how much, and that, they bought more from me than I bought from them.
Oh, okay,
They go
so
through
yours,
the
okay,
making money out of it.
okay.
Yeah. So that's number one. Number two is, Viera, I didn't mean to in any way make fun of you. In fact, I'll tell you why I said that. Back in the 60s, there was a Secretary of State named Dick Stone, who was a very popular man. He was running for Congress, or he was a senator in Congress, United States Congress. And a week before we were losing by a couple of points, he was playing tennis and went to jump the net, fell and broke an arm, and we won in a landslide. So I'm just letting you know that it does work.
You know, if there's ever any doubt about whether I'm making fun of you, I am.
And I thought nothing. You're good, I promise. Yeah, and if I,
That's it,
whenever,
that's all? Okay,
and I
that's all.
have mine.
We have several things. Oh, you have yours. You ready?
Yes, sir, if I may, thank you. Yes, so in response to the written report we received on K-Bar Ranch, I make the following motion, that the design criteria specifically state that, and I have this here for the clerk, quote, the firm shall provide, this is for the forthcoming K-Bar Range Park that we funded $1 million in design of for last year, that the firm shall provide a design that considers inclusive and sensory play, ground level accessible play features as applicable. And I would request that this be included before the November 6th deadline so potential participating firms are aware. That's part of the motion. I would like for staff to verify the scope of the RFQ to include compliance with the ADA and Florida building codes. And I would lastly request a high-level preliminary timeline for council to include the RFQ deadline, completion, review, and scoring of the selection committee, notice of selection, public outreach, design completion, GMP presented to council, breaking ground, and construction complete for a written report on November 20th of 2025.
We have a motion from Councilman Vieira, a second from Councilman Maniscalco. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. And before we lose city staff, I just want to make sure everybody in the city is listening. Tomorrow afternoon, we're going to have a special gathering here at Tampa City Council at 3 p.m. where our city clerk will swear in our new council person, Nia Young. You are all invited to witness that historic swearing in. I look forward to the event. And
Number 17.
Number 17, and I'll be sitting here right next to you. I'll be. It'll be a rose surrounded by two thorns. Oh wait, no, that's not the way it goes. I'm sorry. A thorn surrounded by two roses. No birthday wishes for me. Okay, we have some more serious business. Mr. Shelby, would you like to?
Yes, if I can, Council. I had an opportunity to speak with most of you, unfortunately not all of you, but as you know, you have a special call workshop scheduled for Tuesday morning from 9 to noon. And unfortunately, due to a death in our family, my wife and I will be attending the funeral out of state on Tuesday morning. So my apologies to Council. You have several options. And just to remind you and the public that the purpose of this special discussion meeting was to discuss this, the goals, objectives, and scope of the City of Tampa Charter Review Advisory Committee, along with directives and guidelines for and adopting of the timeline for the application of ballot language to make it onto the ballot on the March 2nd, 2027 municipal election. So council, I'm open to discuss it with you now. I'm glad it's better now than you're here as opposed to tonight when it might be late. But the options, the way I see it, are you can continue this. Now, a reminder, the purpose of this special call workshop was for you as a council in the sunshine to be able to, amongst yourselves, provide to me direction to return with a draft resolution that memorializes all of this for the benefit of the operation of that board. So if you do continue to want to have it, certainly it'll be recorded and minutes will be taken, and if you run the meeting with decision points, which I can provide to the chair's office perhaps between now and Tuesday before I leave to leave town, you can continue to do that, and I can say, based on that, formulate the draft. If I have any questions, I can then work with the chair and his legislative aide, and Ms. Kopesky's been very helpful, to be able to come back with a draft and then still have it set on November 20th on the tentative the guideline. The other thing is you can reset it, and I believe you could check your calendars, but there might be a conflict. The rooms are available. The Sister Cities room is available. Next week, next Tuesday is out because City Council is not present. It's a holiday. City Hall is closed. It's Veterans Day. The date of Tuesday the 18th, the Sister Cities room is available, but there may be conflicts, and you may have to see if everybody is available. Of course, this is the input of everybody, including the administration, the mayor's office, and the city attorney, are also, it's important to get their input as well. So I'm again, my apologies. However council wants to coordinate that, I'm going to do whatever I can to accommodate.
Monday, what about Monday afternoon?
Is there a
Monday the
TPO
10th?
mean?
Yes, but that's at 10 a.m.
Yeah, so we could do
1 p.m.
1 p.m. on Monday the 10th.
Monday the 10th. Could everybody check their calendars? Because I don't.
Lisa, am I available Monday the 10th at 1? It's the only way I can do it.
Right, and Councilman Miranda, I certainly want him to be here.
Shocking.
Okay, wow, if Lewis is available, it's meant to be.
And if we could
Miss
ask
Councilwoman-elect, are you available?
on Monday, November 10th,
Okay,
at what time again?
At 1 p.m.
1 p.m. right after lunch.
So it'd be 1 p.m. If you could block from 1 p.m., it won't go as late as 4.
So Sam, if you're listening, you have to cancel my 1 p.m.
And the other issue would be the Sister Cities room, its availability.
We'll
or
find
city
someplace
council.
else if we have to.
Okay. I just have to know where it is so we notice it. Okay.
We're going to tell everybody but you.
Reschedule, yeah.
Schedule the charter discussion from November, is it 5th? 4th? To November 10th, Monday, 1 p.m., City Hall, and pending verification if it's available, the Sister Cities room, correct?
We have a motion from Councilman Maniscalco, a second from Councilman Hurtak. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you again, Council. Thanks so much.
That was actually relatively painless. I thought that was going to be much worse.
Yeah, that was great.
I have some grievances. Yes.
Oh.
Thank you. Well, it's I don't know if I'm.
I recognize you for your grievances.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this before, and I know there's going to be at least one director who's not going to be happy with me, but oh well. So I've been holding this in for a while, and it's communications department, and I've just been watching the communications feed, and I said when I first came into office, I kind of pushed back on some things that one of our fellow councilpersons used to say about it, and it's like we're one city, we're one city, we're one city. That's why I always push back on we're one city. Why do we need to do this? Why do we do that? Because we're one city. But it's just becoming more and more apparent that that's not necessarily always the truth, and it's never was apparent. And while I'm very appreciative of getting the invitations to participate or attend events, there's very little effort in the communications department to include us in the distribution of that information. It really was it came to light recently with my, in a personal self. I didn't bring it at the time because it seemed so self-serving to say I was part of a process, and then they actually went to great extent to crop me out of the picture and not include any of my remarks. But then just this week at the West Riverwalk project, the same thing. Our council persons were there, and there was a lot of promotion and stuff, and city council was not included. See, you know, and honestly, especially that project, considering when we're not city council, we're CRA. This board is the same CRA. We are also consequential of that. I see it across the board, and I find it very, and for those of you that are listening in the administration and the person part of the department, shame on you. There is one city. This is 50% of the government. We are the legislative body of the city of government. I'm going to ask y'all, and then I'm going to demand it. And if we have to, whatever we sort, you need to start a Tampa City Council social media page and maintain that in an appropriate way, so that the accomplishments of this in the city of Tampa, the people that are in the city of Tampa, understand the work of this Tampa City Council and how much we accomplish as well. Well, we don't have an entire administration working for us. We do a lot of work here, and we're really committed to it. And I'm very proud of the people that I'm sitting up here on the dais with, and I'm proud of the agenda items that they bring forward. And we do an awful lot of stuff, and we do not see it. The communications department manages the mayor's page, and they do an extraordinarily good job. But if you were to watch social media, you wouldn't think Tampa City Council did shit, because that's how it's distributed.
What about getting our own communications team?
Well, I mean, and maybe that's what it's going to take. Maybe it's going to take in the next budget cycle making dramatic change. And I don't want to get there, so don't make me get there. Work with us. And let's fix this problem.
Councilman Carlson.
It shouldn't be like that. And you know, I'm in the communication business. You know, the administration likes to throw out words like conspiracy theorists and all this stuff. I have lots of fact. We have public record. I have witnesses where the communication department has actively put opposition research about me before editors, where they've trash talked me at community meetings during city hours on city time, representing the city. And there's a lot of great people that work in the communication department. I don't think it's coming from the people that communicate, because that's the other excuse they use. Well, they're criticizing our department. It's either coming from the director, or it's coming from the chief of staff, or it's coming from the mayor. And when I've appealed to all three of them in many meetings, the mayor pretty much says, I don't care. And she won't change it. And I pleaded to all of them to change it. It's against the law to use city money for political purposes. And this is third world stuff. You know, when I lived in Singapore, it's essentially a dictatorship there. And when they control the media, they take pictures of opposition party members and they make them look bad, and they take pictures of the people in charge and they make them look good. And we know constantly that there are negative stories pitched. Like, look at the Business Journal story the other day about the South Howard project. It was ridiculous. It said something about how the city council no longer is setting stormwater as a priority. The only reason that anything is happening on stormwater is because we set it as a priority, not because the administration did it. But it's obvious that people are back channeling the reporters. And as an individual, I don't even have time to follow up with all that. So when we went to the Straz Center opening, which was 100% CRA, we had no role, we had no place to sit, we were not invited to turn chairs, we were not invited to say anything, but the mayor had the front stage. She openly argued and lobbied against it, criticized us for voting for it, but somehow we didn't even have a seat to say. And the only picture of me and the whole thing, I hurt my back that morning, and as I'm standing up when Henderson mentioned my name, when she mentioned our names, when I stood up, I grimaced, and they took a picture of me with a grimace on my face and posted that online. Also, I had one of the staff members, who I think is outstanding, invited me a year or so ago to go to the stormwater people who were digging out the ditches. And contrary to the BS that the mayor keeps pushing about how we're stirring up problems, it's only coming from 2 or 3 people, not from the staff. I went out there at the staff person's great recommendation. I handed out water and drinks and food to the people working. I thanked them. We took pictures. Somehow, all the pictures he took, one of my pictures showed up. And so they also play favorites. If they like you, they need your vote, they'll post things. This is third world crap. This is not what the taxpayers of this community want. And it should not be that we have to get our own PR people because they're misleading the public and misrepresenting the presentation. The mayor, Madam Mayor, you need to stand up and change this. It's unacceptable. It's undemocratic. It's un-American. Thank you.
I have to say that the crop was quite something. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Did you want to make a motion?
Just to follow up, I don't like it. And I fought back on this time and time again. It's one city. We should all be working together, but that goes both ways. And honestly, I really just do better. And just so you know, this isn't the first time I've had these conversations privately multiple times, just so you guys know. I've had conversations. I've said I brought these issues time and time again, and a lot of times it was things that I was involved in. I don't want to seem too terribly self-serving. This time I was not able to make it to that event at the West River Walk, but I know two of my fellow council persons were there, and I just felt it was a disservice. And just to make a point, because I know what's going to be said, oh, well, we invite you or you get to speak. That ain't enough, because, you know, I can speak in the woods, and if nobody hears me talk, then, you know, nothing. It doesn't matter. So it's, you know, it has to be part of that promotion.
By design.
It has to be. It has to be equal representation. Two equal separate branches of government, and we should have 50%. Thank you.
And I don't know who else was there, but looking at the pictures, I only saw Guido in the pictures.
And I gave a speech. That was great.
But there were, I mean, turning the shovels, there were 3 former mayors there, fine giving former mayors credit. But from the public perspective, it looks political. But from a CRA perspective, if CRA funds are used, especially in the case of Straz, where it's 100% CRA, we've got to change that dynamic. That's why I'm coming back with proposed changes to the CRA agreement, because any other nonprofit or organization would not allow a partner group to run over them like that.
When I was CRA chair, I definitely tried to work on that. And
I think it's appropriate conversation to have now, because we're also going into the charter amendment. No, I think it's just we're going into the charter review thing, so maybe there's issues in this we can deal with the charter, because, you know, if not hooked then by crook. And of course, again, and as we go into the budget season, let's not forget. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney. The clerk has been wonderfully kind and efficient, and they've confirmed that the Sister Cities room is available from 1 to 4 p.m. on November 10th, Tuesday. So if you can add that to your motion, amend your motion for the location.
I would like to reschedule the charter discussion that was going to be had November 4th to November 10th from 1 to 4 p.m. in the Sister City room at 315 East Kennedy Boulevard, Tampa, Florida 33602, City Hall.
And that is a special call workshop.
Special call workshop.
Thank you, sir.
And for anybody in the administration that's listening to me and is going to come back at me and say that, you know, whatever they want to say about that issue, don't. Just do better. Just do better.
The last BS memo that the mayor put out, come back and threatening me about intimidating, criticizing employees or something like that. I hired an attorney, and if she does it again, I'm going to sue her. You cannot slander people and say things that aren't true. You have to, if you want, and don't do, if the mayor wants to make a statement, come here in front of the public and face the public like we do. Don't send little memos like that so somebody can pull public records on it.